Hello and welcome everyone to the e-summit on solid waste and wastewater management during COVID-19. Green Dream Foundation and Clean India Expo under Smart Cities India Expo has been conducting the webinar series Driving Swachh Swastha Bharat during these challenging times. Nature has surprised us in some cruel ways, be it COVID-19, cyclone, locust attack or earthquake. And as June 5th is observed as World Environment Day, our objective as organizers of these webinar series is to inform, learn, educate, and engage with individuals and communities to contribute and do their bit in sustaining and restoring the environment and planet Earth. Today's e-summit is divided into two tracks. Track 1 will focus on solid waste management during COVID, and we have a distinguished panel of experts. Kindly join me in welcoming our panel. With us, we have Mr. Anil Bansal, Director IPE Global, Mr. Pankaj Bhushan, Environment and Engineer from Lucknow Nagar Nigam, Uttar Pradesh, Dr. Sunil Pandey, Senior Fellow and Director, Environment and Waste Management Division, TERI, Shri Mahabir Prasad, Additional Municipal Commissioner from Municipal Corporation of Gurugram, Haryana, Mr. Masood Malik, Joint Managing Director, Ramki Enviro Engineers Limited, and Mr. Chetan Bargera, founding member, Recycle. The session would be moderated by Mr. Ashish Sachdev, founder, President, Green Dream Foundation. Before handing over the session to Ashish, I would just like to brief upon the rules for our attendees to ensure that we have a disturbance-free session. All attendees are requested to keep themselves on mute and video on off mode. Speakers are requested to switch on their video and unmute themselves as per the requirement while they are speaking and can unmute themselves. Attendees are requested to post all their queries, questions in the live chat box, and please do not unmute yourself at any time. The moderator, Ashish, will ensure that all questions are taken up, and I will now invite Ashish to spearhead the session. Over to you, Ashish. Hello?
Hi, Richa, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the introduction and setting the tone. And welcome all the speakers and panelists for joining. Thank you so much for joining in on time. And today, like Richa has mentioned, we are here to discuss, over the next 3 hours, we're discussing two big topics. And the first topic that we all are here to discuss is the solid waste management during the coronavirus situation. Now, solid waste, is a very important aspect to understand for every person who's interested in environment, or someone who cares about the environment. But how have those things changed during the COVID-19 outbreak? And there are a couple of things that I would mention, and then we'll go through all the speakers one by one. Being on the ground and understanding whatever has been happening recently, the situation with the waste has not been looking that great. While there are guidelines in place by all the regulatory authorities, including the apex body, the Central Pollution Control Board, but whatever is being created as policies and what is happening on the ground, there is a stark difference of what happens. Starting from the point when the waste gets collected, and even prior to that, when it's supposed to be segregated, it is always very surprising that we see that citizens, the residents, they are segregating the waste in a lot of cases. But when the entire collection happens and the transportation of the waste happens, it doesn't happen the right way. It is all mixed, and we all understand that the virus can sustain on the surfaces for days. So it is very, very urgent for us as a country and as organizations to get our act together on the hazardous waste as well. And but will that be enough? Because let us understand, with the country crossing more than 215,000 cases being reported, and with the way it is going, it seems like we are yet to see the peak. And we all know that when the epicenter of coronavirus, Wuhan, witnessed the peak, there was 6 times increased in the biomedical waste. So also as a country, are we prepared to tackle that kind of waste, from the collection to the scientific disposal of such waste? Are we prepared as a country for that? Also, at the same time, let's deliberate on the fact that when it comes to waste, I think the most important step there is not just recycling or managing it, it's also reducing the waste as much as possible. A lot of waste being generated during this time is undesired, especially these single use masks and gloves, and there is a lot of misinformation because of which such products are being sold, and again their management becomes a problem at first place. So firstly, we also have to talk about how do we reduce the waste at source, including the domestic hazardous waste, as titled by the Swachh Bharat mission guidelines rolled out on March 26th. It will be unfair if we don't touch upon the most important aspect of this entire system of waste management, which is our informal waste pickers. It's also important to acknowledge what they have been doing, and also the toughest phase of their life that they've seen over the last 2 months. So how can they be formalized, or how different organizations have done things to support them during this time, or if they have any plans to do that? I think let's ponder upon that as well. Without taking much time, what we will do is we will go, we'll pass on the speaking rights with all the speakers that we have with us today. I'm very pleased with the fact that we have a very diverse panel with us, ranging from municipal corporations to the private sector, to research organizations. All of them are here. In fact, in technology innovations as well. So what we'll do is, people will be there. We have a lot of attendees joining in. While we have this webinar being telecasted through this platform, it is also being broadcasted on live on our social media platform. So at this point of time, more than 350 people are watching this. So they will be sending us questions on the live chat, and our team will be collating these questions on the go. And as and when we are interacting with each other, I'll try and consolidate these questions and pose it to the relevant people. Also, we have also dedicated the last 10 minutes of the session for Q&A itself. But we will, during the session as well as and when every presentation is concluded by a speaker, I will bring up a few questions as well. With that, I will request Mr. Anil Kumar Bansal, who's the Director of IPE Global Limited, to kindly please take over. Mr. Anil, we cannot hear you. No, I think there is a technical issue, and then I would request one of the team members to get in touch with you and get this sorted. In the meantime, we'll then move on to the the next speaker for today, while this issue is sorted out. So Anilji, someone will be reaching out to you. I will now request Dr. Sunil Pandey. He's here. I can see him, one of the first panelists to join in today. He is the Senior Fellow and Director for Environment and Waste Management Division at TERI, and I'll now request to kindly take it over. Dr. Pandey, unfortunately we cannot hear you at this point. Can you please try and mute and unmute yourself? Let's see if that works. Arun or Richa, if you guys are there, could you confirm if you could hear Dr. Pandey, because I cannot hear him. Arun, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, but could you hear Dr. Pandey?
No, we are not able to hear Dr. Pandey. So I guess he's checking with his hardware.
Yeah, I think he's trying a new mic headphone. So let's see if that works. No, unfortunately, we still cannot hear him. See, in the times of technology, such things become an undesired hindrance. Even though we did the testing yesterday and it was working fine. Dr. Pandey, if you could just click on the sound check option on the top right, that might help. So on the screen, you will see, on the top right, when you click on audio, there is a sound check option. Uh, and there you can select the speaking device from the drop down.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, I'm Anil Bansal. Yeah, maybe I think I am unmuted. People have to be unmuted by somebody, I think.
Yeah, sure, Anilji. So in that case, let's start off with you as scheduled. Over to you.
Yeah. So thanks, Ashish. I think very nicely you have opened up the discussion. And as we all know, like waste management is by default is not the prime subject which municipal authorities or government has been giving the focus. Although it's essential service and it's always a very essential, very important public health service that we all know who are working in this sector. And we know the importance even more now, like healthcare services now with the waste management services, the sanitation services was also like even identified as one of the essential service. And even during the major lockdowns, the essential service this was identified as an essential service. And the due credit was even given by the Prime Minister that we all citizens need to understand the importance, and we need to give them their full credit, the informal workers and the sanitary workers and the people who are engaged in the waste management service. And but this is a difficult time, because as we know that we are all talking about that stay safe, stay home and work from home, and we are all doing that since last 2 months. But they have never relaxed. The sanitary workers could never relax. Even you know that we are managing even without the maid and servants and drivers and everybody, but we can't manage without the sanitary worker. Even any society or any place, any house cannot manage without the sanitary worker even for a day. So they are continuously working. And but let us understand that it's not easy for them to understand. When we are talking about the sanitary service, we think that it's important for us. We need to really give it off the waste every day. And in fact, when we give it away the waste to the sanitary worker, we think that our responsibility is over. But we need to understand that it's not easy for them to come to your house every day. I think they not have the best of transport facilities, so they are putting in themselves risk over there. They don't have the best of the protective gears and the facilities with them, so they are at huge risk. And people have not even identified that this is a major challenge which these guys are facing. And especially in the red zones and in the quarantine centers, and people working in the path labs and laboratories and a lot of these places, and even in the hospitals. So there is a huge challenging time which these guys are facing. And still huge thanks to this community that they're still giving their best. They're still surviving and doing this. And a huge credit to even the municipal authorities and the contractors who've been engaged on this service all throughout the country, because it's not really easy for them also to manage and maintain a status quo at this difficult time. And they're all finding it very difficult to keep the staff engaged and maintain the services of the same standard level, because they don't have 100%, I think, people working with them. Some of the workers have gone home, and some of the workers are not well in terms of health wise also. I think they also have maybe 50-60% people working with them. And in fact, they're also trying to make a roster also, I think, in some cities, that they don't have to get everybody on job every day. So that is again municipal authorities and the contractors have been facing a challenge, and somehow they're trying to manage. But at the same time, it's important that we have to manage our waste, because as you said, this can give rise to even the major problem if you don't manage it properly. But we will have to see that how do you manage the waste properly. Of course, the segregation is the most important thing which we have to focus on. Even more important now, because people actually are thinking that now we can't touch the waste, and let's mix up everything and give it away, because whatever habit we have been putting into place, and people are getting used to the segregation practices. Somehow in the beginning, at least, and now maybe people are realizing, in the beginning people said that it's best to not to segregate, and in fact put everything into one maybe plastic bag and give it away or throw it away. But it's more important that we realize that for the people who are handling the waste, the informal or the sanitary workers, for their health, we need to segregate the waste. We need to understand what is the hazardous waste and what is, because even we have new categories of hazardous waste also now. No, they take masks and gloves and a lot of these kind of things which we are generating from households. So now we need to actually understand the third category of waste, hazardous household hazardous waste. Otherwise, people are understanding only the dry and wet waste. But now actually we need to understand that this is the third category, and this third category of waste need not be given every day. I think we need to somehow see that we segregate it, and we try and see with the help of the authorities and with the help of the societies, see that how do we manage this third category of waste and keep it separate from the dry and wet waste, because dry and wet waste ultimately will go into the secondary storage, to the transfer station, to the landfill sites. And again, it's not the status quo for the management of these disposal sites and treatment plants. Most of these treatment plants are not operating of the same level and same capacities, and ultimately the waste is actually getting dumped, and the secondary collection points are also not as that clean. So the entire system is actually facing a lot of problems and a lot of hurdles, and this is challenging time. We sitting here, we can say that they should do it in a proper manner, scientific manner, but the entire chain of waste management is actually facing a huge hit at this particular time, starting from the storage at source, segregation, secondary collection, transportation, and then treatment and disposal. The entire chain of the solid waste management is actually facing a huge challenge, and we have to see that how do you best place the systems. First of all, we also need to see that now even the hospitals and the quarantine centers and some of the hotels which are being used at quarantine centers, so the waste coming out of them, maybe for some time we'll have to consider the entire waste as a potentially infectious waste. Like generally we know that from a biomedical, from a hospital, 80% of waste which is general waste if they segregate it properly. But in this challenging scenario, I think probably we'll have to treat, and probably we'll have to see that is 100% waste coming from the hospitals and quarantine centers and these places is potentially infectious, and keep it at least separate from the mainstream general waste. Otherwise we'll be facing a huge problem. And then we all know that another thing which we are seeing, that these informal waste pickers, the rack pickers, they either are not working because they also, now everybody knows that there is a problem there and they also can get infection. Either they are not working, they've migrated to their particular villages and other places. And if at all they are working, they are facing a dilemma whether to put themselves into the risk of getting infection, or they are facing a starvation also. So they're facing a challenge whether to risk themselves and get into the business again. And problem is that these informal waste pickers by most of the cities and most of the organizations have never been identified as one of the most important value chain in the entire solid waste management. So again, nobody is actually identifying their problem, and nobody is able to understand and resolve the issues which they are facing, and leave aside giving them the protective gears and the PPP equipment and all those things. So this is another problem which they are facing. And anyways, economics wise also, if you see the plastics, we are generating more plastics now, because everything which we are buying from the market, actually if you see the plastic anti-plastic campaign which we were I think taking on in India, now people have forgotten that, and we are taking more and more plastic bags. And true, so because people are thinking that if you take a plastic bag, take something inside it and then throw it away. So we are actually generating more plastic more plastics, and we are not reusing it. And more plastics of all kind of plastics is going into, and especially the polythene bags are going into the waste. And as we all know that although sanitary service was given status of essential service during the lockdown, but not the informal recycling market, not the kabadi walas. So since last 2 months, and God knows for how many months, these people will not be able to have normal functioning. So this entire business is actually getting hit. Like if like I can tell you, I have a good habit of segregating waste in my house, and the good recyclable market which we give it to kabadi wala, even the waste maker is saying that even if I take it from you, I don't get a market. The kabadi walas are not working. So ultimately you will have to throw it away. If I give it to him, he will throw it away. So I have that waste in, somehow I've kept it, but how long you keep it? And the entire recycling market is going to face a problem. And if you see the recycling market, we all know that how it works. It always have to fight. It always have to fight with the virgin plastic. And now with the fuel prices going down, the virgin plastics is actually will be cheaper. So the economics wise also, I think there will not be much value available for the kabadi walas and the entire recycling business, and ultimately that will again hit the informal workers and rag pickers. So this entire industry is going to face a major problem and going to get into the death trap. And if you look at the collection and the treatment disposal systems, anyways, I think we have a friend from Ramki, Mr. Masood, who will give more insights into this. But they must be facing a huge challenge in terms of managing their finances and managing their operations at this point of time. Because anyway, I have seen from my experience that solid waste management has not got that good response from the private sector participation and the engagement of the entire industry. And the private sector industry is always facing a huge challenge in terms of sustaining the entire business. So there are anyways not many contractors who could survive into this business profitably and sustainably. And in fact, even the bigger players like our colleague from Ramki, they will be facing a huge challenge in terms of maintaining this entire business. And until unless government comes forward and support them, and in terms of sustaining and giving them some window where they can actually manage and sustain their operations. Otherwise, this entire private sector is going to get into a big trap, and I'm not very sure that they'll be able to manage the business the way they were trying to manage at this point of time. And what I think is more important at this time is actually, as you started with your points, that not only segregate and the waste, you also reduce the waste. That is important. So reduce means first of all try and minimize the waste you generate, because ultimately this is going to give rise to big problems. You don't think that you just give away the waste and the entire problem is solved. This is a massive problem. And if you even if you reduce your waste by 30-40%, you are a big player in helping the entire into the waste management and the environment management. So first of all, try and reduce the waste, reduce the plastics which are going to the environment, at least reduce the recyclable waste which is going into the environment. And in fact, I would in fact go one step ahead, that in fact this is the right time when people should understand the importance of decentralized waste management system, decentralized composting, and even home composting. And in fact, you will see some of the states who've been trying, some of the cities who've been trying, like Kochi and Alapi and Trivandrum, who've been trying home composting, will be a big gainer in this entire in this particular time. Because home composting, if you do and if you try and do away the recyclables, I think you will have a very lesser quantity of waste which will be ultimately required to dispose of. And in fact, I can assure you that if we all think that we can at least for 3-4 months try and do home composting and trying to do a good segregation of waste, then we can actually help the entire system in managing the solid waste in a better way. So these are the few initial thoughts I had on this subject. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Bansal. Whatever you said is very realistic, and I think very easy to understand. Some of the concerns that you have raised, we've been hearing and also experiencing it on the ground on a day-to-day basis. whether it's to talk about the informal waste pickers, at the same time the need for decentralized waste management than ever before. When I was chatting, prior to the webinar as well with a few panelists, we were discussing as to that decentralized maybe was a recommendation earlier under the solid waste management 2016 guidelines, but now I think this pandemic is a reminder that that is the way to go, because that is a sustainable way forward. In fact, a question also came in while we were chatting. A question has come in that the what is being done to address or manage the solid waste from hospitals and biomedical labs. So now to address that, and other upcoming speakers can also take it up, is something coming out of the biomedical waste is has to be going for the biomedical waste treatment facilities, where what I understand is the disposal, the way of disposal is incineration, which we call the scientific disposal, and wherever that facility is not available, they suggest deep burial in remote areas. So, but however, if there are any other ways, any other recommended ways, I'm just telling based on what I have understood from the CPCP guidelines as well. So,
Yeah.
if there are other ways of managing that kind of waste, I would love to know.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think give a comment here, because we all know that
sure.
biomedical waste management is having at least 5-6 categories, 5-6 different categories of waste which they manage. But in this particular scenario, and 80% of the biomedical, 80% of the healthcare waste is like actually a general waste if you segregate it properly. But as I said earlier, at this particular time, most of the waste is actually potentially infectious, at least if in terms of the corona. So we will have to see that that is treated as a general waste, like 80%, 70%. First of all, you have to ensure that that's segregated properly. But even then, you cannot mix it with the general waste. Earlier 80% of this waste actually used to get mixed up with the general waste category, and right so, because this was if you segregate it properly, it was general waste. But at this particular time, the waste coming out from the hospitals and the laboratories, and especially the quarantine centers, we will have to, I think, have a separate stream of waste, and then maybe treat it separately. That's very important this particular point of time.
Definitely, that carries a lot of significance, but the ground reality tells something else, wherein all the waste is getting mixed together, which makes the entire solid waste, municipal solid waste, infectious. Like I said, most in a lot of cities, we have personally seen waste, even if people are segregating the waste. Let's say they segregated at least into three categories that they were asked during this time, which is dry, wet, and the hazardous waste, which is your, let's say, use masks and gloves in a regular household I'm talking about. But when once it's collected or somewhere in that process of transportation, and when it's taken to a facility, that waste gets mixed. It is being touched by the municipal workers, in a lot of cases by bare hands, which is next level of risk. In fact, even though waste management is an essential service, I don't think it gets treated that way by all the segments in the process. And again, to address a very good point that you mentioned, and I think the private players here will also mention it in the presentation as to what kind of support is given, to these private entities from the public sector in the regular times as well as in these tough times when waste collection requires next level of infrastructure. You need more segregation, you need a more efficient transportation technologies, and then recycling it properly. I think the recycling industry also took a huge hit, which impacted not just the informal waste pickers but the formal recycling industry as well in India, which is responsible for recycling majority. It's like India is very good at recycling otherwise, specifically for plastic, while globally only 9% plastic gets recycled as per the study last year. India's average is always more than 80-85%, and the reason for that is this informal network that we have, who is able to collect this so in such a robust fashion. So without taking much time, I think so thank you, Mr. Bansal, that was very informative, and we'll keep taking up more questions. I'll now request Dr. Sunil Pandey, who is a senior fellow and director, environment and waste management division at TERI. Hopefully the mic is working now.
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you hear me now?
Good afternoon, sir. Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashish, and thank you also, Mr. Bansal, for setting up the context. I have a presentation, small presentation. Can someone help me sharing it?
I've just given you the presenter rights.
So, can you see the slide which is there on the screen, the participants?
Yes,
Or I mean,
yes, we can see it now. If you could just put it in full screen, we can see it better.
it's a full screen PDF. The
Okay.
font is still small. I mean, little smaller, but I'll explain it since Mr.
Sure.
Bansal has already set up the context.
Sure.
There is this International City Alliance, more than 100 cities which are part of it. They also have come out with process to guidelines basically on how to handle waste during the COVID time. And what this chart essentially says is that once you have households which are either earmarked confirmed cases or into quarantine, they need to be segregated. They need to be separated out from other households which are in green zone. And the green zone waste needs to be managed separately, and the red zone and orange zone, where I mean they are suspects and they are confirmed cases, they need to be managed separately, in the sense collected, transported separately if possible into vehicles which are earmarked for transporting COVID suspected waste. And as Mr. Bansal said, what happens in biomedical waste, that preference in this period should be on incineration. The mixed waste, I mean, at this stage, even if the COVID houses generate mixed waste, it's not an issue. I mean, it should not be so much of an issue, because this waste has to be handled carefully. All this has to be collected and transported to incineration center. And the separate waste, green waste, waste generated from green zones has to be segregated as they were doing earlier, and has to be sent to recycling facility. Unfortunately, during the COVID time, recycling facilities are not working because I mean industries were asked to stop their operations. But I mean, if you look at statements from ISWA, International Solid Waste Association, they said that recycling, as the waste management is concerned, as far as waste management is concerned, recycling is part of it, and that also should be an essential service, which I'll cover in the next slide. And recycling has to continue because I mean there's a waste accumulated, and the waste which is recyclable, even from the mixed zone, can be cleaned and sanitized, and then subsequently, say after storing it for 72 hours in open in sun, can be sent for recycling. So I mean that's the recommendation from City Alliance. And if you look at
Dr. Pandey, sorry to interrupt, but if you could just click on view on your screen and do a full screen, we'll be able to see better, because attendees are saying they're having a hard time see it. Yeah,
sure.
Full screen mode.
Is this better?
Perfect.
Now?
Thank you so much. Yes,
Yeah.
perfect.
Sure. There's also a recommendation from ISWA, as I said earlier, and there are other agencies engaged in solid waste management. And they say that to the extent possible, now we understand COVID better, no service disruption, including recycling, because even WHO says that this is not a short-term pandemic. It is going to continue, and it might continue for a longer period than we anticipated earlier. What it importantly says is that for sanitation workers and for recycling community as well, discontinue manual handling to the extent possible, because manual handling is the way coronavirus can get transmitted. Storage for at least 3 days before collection, and avoid plastic packaging to the extent possible, because what evidences say that among the different materials, metal, paper, plastics, the virus stays on plastic for longer period. And that is why the 72 hours of storage is required. And proper provision of PPEs need to be there. Disinfection at every stage should be there, and frequent hand washing, as WHO also recommends, with soap, and treatment of discarded masks and gloves. And what CPCB has added, CPCB has come up with the guidelines which are there in subsequent slides. If the time permits, I'll cover that as well. That these gloves which are collected after people discarded them, they need to be cut at the time of collection, or even the residents can cut them and discard, so that they cannot be reused. And also the equipment which are involved in collection, transportation, and transportation at the recycling or disposal sites also need to be sanitized at periodic frequencies. Household hazardous waste, except the sanitary waste, need to be stored by households to the extent possible. And hopefully the COVID period gets over in 3 months, 4 months, 5 months time, and then the household, except for the sanitary waste, can then be taken out to household hazardous waste disposal facility. CPCB guidelines, though, I mean, Mr. Bansal said that waste needs to be reduced, and I completely agree with that in the waste hierarchy. But for some point of time, for some time, the plastic waste, especially those involved in biomedical waste collection, yellow bags and red bags, are going to increase for some time, because there will be more biomedical waste generation. And also CPCB recommends double layered bags in case of bags are used, yellow bags are used for collection. And double layered, in the sense, in more practical terms, will be bag in bag, and that will ensure that this plastic waste would increase for some time till we are over with the COVID situation. They have recommendation for sanitization, 1% sodium hypochlorite solution, and 0.5% chlorine solution for sanitization of pans which are used in treatment. At the treatment, not at treatment facility, but at the isolation wards and camps. They have recommendation also for PPEs, goggles, face shields, hazmat suit, nitrile gloves, etc. They need to go into red bag. Other waste need to go into yellow bag and taken to biomedical waste facility for managing it further. We were discussing about packaging. Packaging is a necessary evil, and this is an example which I'll show you from our deliberations in China. And this is in the circle, you'll see a small moon cake, which is very popular in China and which is eaten extensively around the New Year time. And you can, the slide shows how much packaging is used for this small moon cake. And at times this moon cake is not even eaten fully, just a bite and is thrown. So that shows that how much packaging is involved in packing such a small piece of moon cake, and how much there is a scope for reducing such packaging. So there is certainly overall in general terms for managing waste, there's certainly scope for reducing waste, reducing the excess packaging without actually compromising the quality of material which you want to pack. And companies have shown that packing sizes can be reduced. And clear-cut cases now, when you go for purchasing mobile phones, the packing size have been reducing, and the kind of packaging which they use are more eco-friendly now and easy to recycle. The next slide, without taking much time, I'll also come for products which we use day to day. There's a need also to make them modular and make them in a way that the parts which are not functioning can be removed, and functional parts, they can be replaced by functional parts rather than throwing away the entire product. This is a case where a mobile phone with modular functionality is shown here, where say if ROM is not working, it can be removed. If the camera is not working, it can be removed and replaced by another camera. Or if you want a high resolution camera, it can be removed, rather than discarding the entire mobile phone. So such kind of concepts need to be brought in. Unfortunately, we need to basically engage with manufacturers and also educate them and tell them that designing a product with longer life would be good for them in a longer run, because of paucity of raw materials which is happening. Soon they will run out of raw materials basically to manufacture such products. So faster we look at these measures for reducing waste, better it is. In the end, I would like to end it with that now it's time that we start moving from linear to circular economy, where waste generation is minimized, trying to achieve zero waste generation from in the product manufacturing, usage, and recovery and recycling, and minimizing the waste in the process. So I'll end here and thank you with the message that we need to reduce, reuse, and recycle. and we'll come up with the questions. I mean, with further questions again if required.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pandey, for the brief presentation and touching upon a few aspects. While you were speaking, a couple of questions came in. I would request you to take it up. It's a very simple question though, but I think a lot of times everyone should be made clear. So a good question that has come in is, why do we need to collect, transport, and process the waste separately for the red zones? The virus doesn't travel without contact.
Yeah, that is true. But what happens is the virus is not transmitted without contact, but virus can survive in materials for a longer period. For example, I mean, that is why that there is a need for, if any material reaches a recycling facility, need to store it for 72 hours for virus to get inactive. Of course, I mean, virus needs a living body basically to transmit. But I mean, why I said red zone can be collected mixed also is for the fact that if, I mean, red zone is already a stress zone where, I mean, we know that COVID has spread. And if, I mean, people are under stress, not segregating waste, for the waste workers, you should not so much bothered about waste segregation. But I mean, whatever way you can collect the waste into dedicated COVID carriers and take it for incineration, preferably incineration, so that, I mean, then at the high temperature, the virus gets destroyed. So that was the purpose. I mean, if you segregate, fine, but I mean, don't stress so much on segregation.
Sure. And Dr. Pandey, apart from the only scientific disposal method currently known here in India is incineration for biomedical and hazardous waste. Are there any other ways of processing being followed in some other countries that we can learn, or are there new processes being researched? Because incineration overall is not an environment-friendly procedure anyway.
No, incineration certainly is not favored technology for the waste which is not good for incineration. So, for example, if you're trying to incinerate a food waste where there's a high moisture content, or I mean waste which is which can be safely recycled, certainly waste hierarchy would promote recycling. But for the waste which is too hazardous and not easy to recycle or hazardous for recycling, like a biomedical waste, as told by earlier speaker, if the waste is too infectious to be handled and recycled and recycled, then it's better to incinerate it. And that is why, I mean, incineration is still allowed for biomedical waste, common biomedical waste treatment facilities.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So, thank you so much, Dr. Pandey. We'll have more questions coming in, so we'll take it in the due course of time. I will now request Mr. Masood Malik, who's the Joint Managing Director for Ramki Enviro Engineers, and we would love to hear his thoughts out, because while we have heard the policy side, research side, the social sector, what's happening on the ground, it's also now important to see what's happening in the private sector and how has that impacted you. And before I do that, I'll request Dr. Pandey to kindly unshare your screen so the other presentation can be started. Great. So over to you, Mr. Malik. Let me see if you have the.
Can you hear me? Am I coming through?
Yes, very well, very well.
Okay. And are you able to see a screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. Perfect.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Ashish. Appreciate the tee up, and Mr. Bansal, Sunil, pleasure to hear from you once again, and thank you for framing this discussion so succinctly and accurately. Let me just share the practitioner's experience of the last 2.5 months, and I hope it is useful. Now, before I go into talking about waste management during COVID, let me start by talking a little bit about who we are. because this is part of the context. This will probably help us understand. So Ramki Enviro is a full-service sustainability company. It works across all aspects of the waste ecosystem and all aspects of the circular economy aspects, including recycling and other environmental solutions around water, wastewater, and management of facilities, disinfection, etc. It started in India about 25 years ago, and in the last 25 years has spread extensively across the country. If we talk about COVID, we are currently operating about 22 common biomedical waste facilities, 15 additional states where we are running common industrial hazardous waste facilities, a number of other assets around waste management, collection, recycling, and resource recovery. It has also gone global in the last 15 years and has now operations pretty much across Asia and with some presence in Africa. Overall, about 65 facilities operating across the world. Most of them are in India, and about 20,000 workforce. This 20,000 workforce is all in India. So let me just go into what happened to us around March 15th, 20th, in that time frame when we saw that the lockdown is on its way and business continuity and the ability to continue serving the communities that we serve is going to be a huge challenge. Some of the infrastructure challenges that we had to respond to in the early days of the lockdown were, as has been mentioned by my previous speakers, biomedical waste management capacity constraints, the whole challenge of how do you collect COVID or potentially infected waste, but from residential areas that are not designated healthcare facilities. And how do you actually respond to a challenge which is this big and this widespread, such that you are able to infect entire cities or entire areas? There is definitely a shortage of BMW management capacity if I look at it from a country standpoint. Biomedical waste typically gets generated by each of these facilities in kilograms. And we heard about the 6x growth that Wuhan experienced. Do we have the capacity for that? Do we have the ability to respond to disinfecting or cleaning large areas in a manner that is safe, especially when, again, the early days of COVID, you'll all remember, there were no PPEs available. PPE just went off the shelves. All vendors basically ran out because the whole world decided that they need to go and buy PPE for themselves. And people who really needed PPE at that point in time had to resort to we had to resort to some basic innovative approaches on how to source and supply our workforce. I'll share some examples of how we try to respond to it. Now, it's interesting that whilst the COVID waste quantities started coming in, it is also important to understand that the smaller healthcare facilities, the clinics and the nursing homes, they actually shut down. And they typically contribute about 30% of the biomedical waste generation in any catchment in any city. Now, interestingly, the capacity utilization, therefore, in the early days of the lockdown or the early days of the infection in India, the capacity utilization in BMW facilities, biomedical waste facilities, did not change. We pretty much had the same amount of waste coming in. Whatever dropped because of nursing homes and smaller healthcare establishments shutting down came in form of additional waste from COVID. So there were really no challenges there. However, I think the policymakers responded quickly. They foresaw that the quantities of waste will go up. And they said it is possible for the industrial incineration facilities, common incinerators, for industrial waste, they can also treat COVID waste. Now, a typical biomedical waste incinerator is, typically from 100 to 250 kilograms per hour, maximum 500 kilograms per hour. That is the capacity of a typical biomedical waste incinerator. On the other hand, industrial hazardous waste incinerators, I mean, they have capacities of all our incinerators run at 1.5 tons per hour. And therefore, there is an order of magnitude capacity arbitrage between biomedical waste facilities and industrial hazardous waste incinerators. So just by one policy enablement, one is able to actually enhance the ability to respond to COVID waste. Now, let us say even the 22 or 25 incinerators, large incinerators we have running across the country, fall short of capacity. This hasn't happened till date. We're not even close to it, running short of capacity. But let's assume for a second that that was to happen. Just to give you an idea, we run India's largest waste to energy plant in Delhi. That generates 24 megawatts of power. That actually processes 1,200 tons of waste every day. It basically has the ability to incinerate 1,200 tons of waste every day at high temperatures. Temperatures that exceed the requirements for a biomedical waste incinerator. In Wuhan and throughout China, it is these waste to energy facilities that actually started accepting large amounts of mixed municipal waste, potentially infected waste, and were able to actually handle it without much challenge. Similarly, when it came to collecting COVID waste from residential areas, I think a policy enabler came there as well. We were able to repurpose and designate our biomedical waste vehicles, collection vehicles, and industrial waste collection vehicles to collecting them waste from designated quarantine zones and isolation areas. The process of collection, disinfection, PPE, everything was exactly the way we did for traditional biomedical waste. So for all practical purposes, the brief that has been given to everyone was, if it is suspect, assume that it is hazardous, assume that it is infectious. On city level, disinfection, when traditional capacities were limited, you will see some examples here. These are from our operations in India, but also our operations elsewhere in the world, where one was able to actually bring into play very large capacities of disinfected distribution and fogging systems. There are now great examples across India as well of drones disinfecting difficult to reach surfaces. So the point I was trying to make was that when such a big challenge came into play, what I refer to as the seminal event of our times, I think both policymakers, both our researchers, the government authorities, all, in my view, realized fairly quickly that what we do as waste collectors and as treatment and disposal facilities has never been more important. And I think they have responded, and they have responded in a very timely manner. That said, on deployment of these services, this was on the infrastructure side, we faced massive issues. You know that workforce availability became a massive issue overnight when the lockdown happened. People could not move out of their homes. So our workers had no way to get to our workplace. There were locations where the local communities, whether it is a colony or a village, said, if you go to work, we will not be allowed to come back. And we had to respond to that kind of a situation. Even if there were people who were willing to come to work, are able to come to work, how do you get them to work? Because there's no transport permitted. And then the whole issue of health and safety that I talked about. And I wanted to very quickly touch upon how we responded to this. And I think we were able to respond to it, one, by ensuring that facilities are made available. These people are truly the heroes of today. And a decision was taken, at least in our organization, and I know that this was supported by a number of our clients and government stakeholders, that no expense is too high for enabling this service. We had to arrange housing for them, we did. We had to arrange food for them, we did. We had to retool to a new operating environment in terms of training, in terms of PPE. We did that. New policies, new programs, all of that came into play. And I think a very key enabler in all of this was letting people know how important it is what they do. And I think across all the cities in which we operate currently we collect waste in about 25 cities across India. Our people realized that what they're doing is literally God's work. It is at par as what healthcare workers are doing or law enforcers are doing at this point in time. And what is really amazing is, and I'm so happy to share this with you, that our communities, the ecosystem in which all these workers operate, has celebrated them. I mean, we were showered with flowers. I don't know how many times a waste picker in the city of Raipur ever experienced being showered with flowers. They are being applauded wherever to go. We have campaigns going out. You know, every Ramki waste collector today wears this badge that you can see in the screen, which very proudly to say, I'm a COVID fighter and I'm out there for you. And I think it is this effort, together with the enabling policies that I think our government was able to put out in a timely manner, that we were able to respond to these issues. I'll take a few minutes to talk about all the questions that have been raised and also talk about some challenges that we are facing. The first one, a question was raised by Ashish right in the beginning of this discussion. Is there a stark difference between policy and what is happening on the ground? I can tell you that it is not easy today to operate. A number of the previous speakers have mentioned about this. It's not easy to operate today because the long-term economic viability of this kind of an operation is yet to be seen. That said, we believe that corporations have a responsibility, and by corporation I mean companies, private sector companies also. We have a responsibility beyond just the economics. And this is probably one of those times when we have to put economics secondary and respond primarily to each of the communities in which we are operational. So therefore, as waste quantities grow, I can tell you very confidently that we will be able to, with the support of policymakers, increase capacity to treat that waste in a proportional manner. Today, every kilogram of waste that is being collected by us, which is potentially infectious, is being treated as potentially infectious. And we have sufficient capacity to treat it. And like I said, if tomorrow these quantities go up, there are additional facilities available across the country, operated by us, but also operated by other companies and corporations. We will work with them to enhance capacities where required. But the role of science is very important. I think Sunil raised a very, very important point. On plastics is the primary source of containment of wastes today, the primary mode of containment of wastes. And unfortunately, it is plastics on which the survivability of this virus is the longest. It's actually 5 days or up to 5 days on a plastic surface. What is really challenging, that other alternates which are traditionally known as sanitary alternates, easy to clean alternates like stainless steel, it survives for over 4 days on stainless steel. Where it survives the least, surprisingly, is on porous surfaces that are not that don't have a lot of mechanical integrity or strength, like paper, cardboard. On cardboard, it is 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. It's ironical. But as research comes in, as alternate disinfectants and better containment media is discovered and put into use, I think the challenges and the quantities of waste might become more manageable. On the question of viability of recycling, I think you have to distinguish, and somebody already did earlier in this discussion, between the potentially infected waste and the what is confirmed to be non-infected. I think it's extremely important that anything that is potentially infected is dealt with under the precautionary principle. When you are in doubt, assume that it is infected and treat it as such. And yes, that cannot be recycled. That should be disposed, and that should ideally be disposed in a manner that is sure to destroy the infection. However, all other waste, it is extremely important that recycling activities get the same coverage policy-wise and government support-wise as is healthcare, as is solid waste management, as is sanitation, as is disinfection, because they are an integral part of the ecosystem. I know for a fact that whilst our waste management, collection, transport, treatment, disposal operations continued, our recycling operations, we are the largest recycler in the country in terms of quantities and number of operating locations. Our recycling operations have come to a have stopped, actually, largely stopped. It is important that the recycling operations continue because they are important part of the ecosystem. If that ecosystem does not survive, then the longer term sustainability of waste management gets affected poorly. And therefore, I just wanted to underline a call given by a previous speaker about ensuring that recycling of the right substrate, of the right waste, continues during this time. All I would want to sort of close with is that sustainability, that this event and other extreme climatic events and these locust attacks that we're seeing, all of this, it's a very stark reminder that we are facing sustainability challenges that are unprecedented. I think our responses, both from a research standpoint, from a policy standpoint, from a government standpoint, and from the private sector standpoint, needs to be equally unprecedented, needs to be equally coordinated. I therefore believe that the circular economy call that has been given is definitely the way to go. The image on this screen, this is the last screen I wanted to share with you. The image on this screen is our command and control center, from where we are monitoring and trying to support all our operations around the country. I just wanted to share that we currently have these 20,000 people who are out there for you. I personally, I'm in the comfort of an office. I'm incredibly grateful to these people and all the thousands of other people across the country who are doing this work for us today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malik, for sharing with us the great work your team has been doing on the ground, and our gratitude to all the municipal workers who have stood by in this phase of coronavirus when we had the luxury of being able to work from home or operate from home. These guys were out there on the ground, literally getting their hands dirty and making sure that this essential service keeps running. Also, we had a few questions coming in, when you were presenting, so I'll take a couple of them. Also, at the same time, a very important point that you mentioned, I think all these series of unexpected events that we are seeing, it's all very beautifully interrelated. Whether it's the pandemic, whether it is the locust attack, whether it's the once in 100 years type of cyclones, I think these are all interrelated to the fact when we do not manage our waste well. I'll relate it to the reason today. Obviously it is, we are not able to capture the emissions. The waste end up going into landfills, or it is managed in an unscientific way. And all of that interrelates to the fact that it leads to climate change. And I think that's one reality that we cannot ignore anymore. And that's why I keep saying that, we have been talking about development over the last few decades now. Right now is the time to make sustainable development a norm. Otherwise, we will see all these events becoming very, very frequent. Obviously, we saw such a pandemic coming after the Spanish flu in 1920, but there's no guarantee that the next one will happen in 2120, right? So we have to be prepared with all this happening, and all of this is manageable. We have solutions on our side. I think the government sector, who happen to be the clients of companies like yours, and there are a lot of other companies working in this space as well, both in India as well as globally. It's important that the technologies are evaluated from a perspective that they're actually performing on the triple bottom line, and there shouldn't be any excuse to say that, oh, we are not able to manage waste well, because there are solutions available now. And I hold all the municipal corporations and the government bodies accountable for this all the time as a citizen of this country. And I think it's very important to everyone hearing this, that if you do not see waste around you being managed well, it is definitely, you should definitely raise the voice. We raise voices on all kinds of issues, but at times we ignore waste a lot. And I think waste must not be ignored, because waste could either be a resource if managed well, but it could also be a disastrous thing if unmanaged unscientifically. So a question that I have for you, Mr. Malik, is a very, very interesting question, though. A couple of people have asked a similar question, that many organizations have, started, had ventured into waste management over the last few years in our country. A lot of startups happened, but for some reason they were not able to make their projects viable. And Ramki is one of the only ones who's pretty old in this domain now in India, pretty established, doing well while managing the waste. So this is, I think, more like a question from an innovator or an entrepreneur who's wanting to ask that, what are the key things that made your organization sustain for so long and will make you sustain in the future as well? What were those key things?
Difficult question, actually, to answer for somebody who's been with the company for just over a year. But I will try to share my understanding of what I've seen as being a part of this organization ever since its ownership changed. The first is actually focus. I think this was not another infrastructure company which also does waste management. This was not another manufacturing company which also does waste management. This company started as an environmental company. It only did that. In fact, it diversified beyond environment much later. It's essentially in its core a waste management and environmental solutions company. So I think that focus and the first mover advantage that it got. Its first biomedical waste facility was set up before the biomedical waste rules came. Before the rules were notified, its first biomedical facility was already permitted. Before the first hazardous waste facility in India, common hazardous waste facility in India, the first integrated solid waste management project in India, the largest waste to energy plant in India, in fact, which is running very, very sustainably. So on and so forth. I think that core focus on waste and waste management too. I think international partnerships. It went international. Not many people know, but Ramki cleans. If you land in Changi, which is probably the most sort of well-run airport in the world, Ramki cleans Changi. When you come out of Changi airport and drive to the city, those roads are cleaned by us. It is that expertise, that experience that added to the core focus that we had on waste management, our international ventures, partnerships, the ability to learn from them. 3, I think I've completely known compromise on the commercial model. Whilst waste and even to a larger extent circular economy has become a bit of a fad, a lot of people have come in and invested in it very aggressively. I remember a time when lots of companies said, I will pay for waste. I will actually go and pay royalty to a municipal corporation so to collect waste because I'll make enough money from the recyclables, or I'll make enough money from energy. The fact is that Ramki believes in polluter pays. The waste generator, either the municipal corporation or the industry which generates waste, has to pay for its safe management and disposal. And this non-compromising approach to the fact that the generator of the waste eventually has to pay for it. Waste is wealth, yes, but that wealth, unfortunately, in the current environment, does not pay for itself. Yeah, for some waste streams, it might be possible to recover resources in an economically viable way, but not for every waste stream, and definitely not for municipal waste. So I think there were 2 or 3 such key decisions that the company has taken over its 25 years history. And finally, the last point is, I think it has been able to attract investments at the right time. Today, the largest investment in the environmental space in this part of the world is the investment from KKR into Ramki. So I think its access to capital has been supported by its ability to attract financing. You cannot create impact at scale if you cannot attract capital at scale. So I think it is a combination of these factors. Finally, the last point, and probably the most important point, in 25 years, when I came in here, I was very surprised. A majority of the people who work in Ramki, those 20-something thousand people, they have been there for a long time. So there is a continuity and a culture of pride that this organization is somehow able to inculcate its employees. Once people come, they just don't leave. I'm new, yeah. So I'm only learning about this particular sort of organic DNA of this organization, which is very strange. I don't get it 100%, but it is true. And maybe that is a part of the reason why it has sustained.
Sure. Thanks for summing it up so well. And I think all those reasons pretty much should answer the question from this person, that it's not just one thing. You really need to be fostering partnerships at the same time, not really compromising on the quality of the works. And I think, yeah, that answers, because if people have been staying by a company for so long in any domain, that tells a lot about the company's way of doing business. So thank you so much for sharing that knowledge. I think so far all the speakers have been able to connect a lot of dots. We have seen, we have heard about the problems, we heard about the solutions, and we have seen, people who are working on the ground getting their hands dirty during not just this problem, but also beyond the pandemic as well. People have been very interestingly listening and asking a lot of questions. So most of them have already been addressed. A couple of them remain, which I will park for the Q&A round at the end, because we have just one more speaker left, and then we will have a quick 5 to 10 minute Q&A round, just to ensure that we are able to wrap this up by 3:30. So now I'll request our friend Chetan from Recycle to kindly share his thoughts. I'll request to stick to a timeline of possibly 7 to 8 minutes. Over to you, Chetan. I'm not able to hear you as yet. You are on mute, Chetan. You are unmuted now. Can you please say something? I can't hear you, unfortunately. Chetan, could you say something or try out the same thing that you tried yesterday during testing? Chetan, I cannot hear you. There has to be some hardware issue. If you could use your earphones like you used yesterday, that might work. If changing the device might help, please try out a different device. In the meantime, in interest of time, I'll start taking up a couple of questions from the audience, and the most popular ones. Some people have asked that, how can the waste which is hazardous in nature can be treated in the incinerators of these industrial waste incinerators or waste to energy incinerators, and then how is the air pollution angle managed? So I will open it up for any one of you to take up that question.
I think I'll start off. I'm operating this. So if you look at the industrial hazardous waste incinerators and the biomedical waste incinerators, the industrial hazardous waste incinerators are a larger capacity version of the biomedical waste incinerators. The incinerators that we operate The biomedical waste incinerators are typically either static double chamber incinerators or rotary double chamber incinerators. On the other hand, the industrial incinerators are almost all rotary, large rotary incinerators. So in terms of temperature, in terms of residence time, in terms of air pollution control, in terms of and the air pollution control in an incinerator is actually in multi stages. So you have uh, different kinds of scrubbing systems as well as particle arrest systems. And interestingly, all our biomedical waste incinerators, industrial incinerators, and waste to energy plants operate with a continuous emission monitoring system. So you don't just rely on the fact that there are these treatment equipment, a dry scrubbing system, a wet scrubbing system, a electrostatic precipitator, or a bag filter, etc. You also are doing that online monitoring on a continuous basis. The command and control center that I talked about, so we beam this data live from all our locations, not just to CPCB, which is a mandatory requirement. I do not know who sees it there, but I know who sees it in Hyderabad. At a command and control system, there are 24/7 guys who are actually sitting, and an alert goes out if we are approaching 0.8 of a limit. If a limit is 1 and we cross 0.8, which is our threshold for alerts, alert starts going out. So there is a lot of control on this. We believe that in the new operating environment, if pollution is not managed, associated with these facilities not managed, we will not be sustainable. For one reason or another, we'll be shut down.
Exactly. I think for any process to be sustainable, it has to be while it has to be obviously financially sustainable, but environmental sustainability has always to be there. And I'm glad that acknowledgement is there in the industry, because long term or short term, that's the choice to be made, and someone who has to stay in here for long term has to take care of the environment as well. So I think that that answers. Let me see if Chetan is able to speak, or we are able to hear him now. Chetan, could you say something? Okay,
Is it
great.
audible
Awesome.
now? Excellent.
Yes.
Right. Could you
Thank
also please pass on the presentation rights, please?
I have done that. Thank you.
Excellent. So before we move on to what Recycle has to present. I'd like to thank on behalf of Recycle all the COVID army, as we call them, for their contribution towards ensuring our backyards have been safe and ensuring the processes haven't been disrupted while all the other industries and states had come to a standstill. So the last slide that Mr. Malik presented was the perfect way to move towards how technology or how those disruptions can play a role in solid waste management post-COVID. So before we move that, so we being on the ground and experiencing the challenges that were mentioned by our speakers, we had created a 5-point formula for ourselves called as acronym as SMART, where we segregate, you modularize, you analyze, you reduce, and then you track how the process has been executed. To give you a context of where this acronym comes from, let me introduce what Recycle does and how it helps, how its tech platforms have been helping the recycling industry to stand again and be strong the way it was before the COVID break. So Recycle basically tries to enable and catalyze digital commerce through its technology platforms, and we connect each and every stakeholder in the supply chain, right from the place where the waste will be generated to the processors, even ULBs on the rural and urban front who need solutions to properly channelize their waste. I'll quickly move to the smart part of the solution that we were talking in the post-COVID era. Mr. Sharma brightly pointed out the need for segregation, especially for plastic. We should remember that plastic is an excellent packaging material till the time it enters your waste bin. So the first change in mindset that has to come in is to stop looking at plastic, the end of life plastic, as waste. Start treating it more like raddi, which traditionally for newspaper we have used the term, and it very rarely enters the waste stream. So this way, this is one way to ensure that we are reducing the strain on the already to the end stretched waste management collection mechanism. If we are able to segregate at our home and ensure that it goes to a different channel through these private sector companies and goes to recycling instead of going into dump yards and making an additional strain on our waste collection mechanism. Now, how do we do that? One is so every household uh, can be incentivized or can be motivated to segregate through three different channels. One is the place of work. If the organization, even if you're not in the stream of waste management, if you are pushing for segregation, if you're pushing for sustainability, that is one peer pressure that you build for the household to segregate. Secondly, it's the social pressure around your society or the area that you live in. Today, we have WhatsApp groups right from which vegetable cart is coming into your society to discuss more important issues with the ULB members as a part of it. So the point of segregation needs to be discussed and brought about in the societies. Drive RWAs to start segregating more and bring in that social pressure for every individual. And finally, the potent solution or most potent model that we have identified is your kids, the schools that they visit. If already there are a lot of awareness programs to be conducted through schools, and if they are increased, if they are made more trackable and accountable, so not just the awareness programs, if you are able to track what volume is generated after a certain session of messages given and then calculate weight based on that, that will help. So this is tech where the tech part of it comes here is when you are able to track how your message has been delivered and how effective was it. Is it from the employer that you are able to make a change? Is it from a school? And this will help you plan better programs in future. In Recycle especially, we have made it a part of our onboarding process itself, where a new employee, when he joins, he has to move towards a zero waste household from his own doorstep. And then the clients and the partners that we talk to, we try to push the same messaging. Next step after segregation comes modularization. I was luckily, Dr. Pandey pushed upon that point for a particular mobile phone. Like you see, you can modularize and remove certain parts. In the collection mechanism itself, the distributed collection mechanism that Mr. Sharma talked about, it becomes even more paramount important in the post-COVID era, where if you have a system where you can track where one particular waste pick collector has gone, which households has he visited, and then if it comes to a central center, you contaminate all the other waste as well, but you have a modularized system with mini centers where this collection is done. You could then isolate those particular containment zones, and then let the other parts of the city or the other parts of the area to be the regular waste collection mechanism could progress as it was before. After having this distributed system, the next step is to analyze which part of your city, which part of the area is generating what sort of waste, what volume of plastic. During the COVID period, where only online delivery of food was permitted and restaurants were closed, with bachelors and students being locked into the city, a lot of packaging waste has been generated through that as well. Is there a way to identify this and collect this plastic before it gets contaminated into the regular waste stream? And can it be channelized through a different recycling channel? This could be made possible through a tracking mechanism where the doorstep itself, the collection is being done and being tracked. After analyze, we move to reducing this waste. So first we pushed for segregation we pushed for modularization so that it is collected in a certain way. Then you can analyze and understand where the stream is moving. Then you reduce it. And finally, the most important factor is tracking where this particular waste came from and where it has gone for recycling. Uh, Pre-COVID, it was important more from a perspective of ensuring transparency in what volumes of waste are generated and who is recycling it. But post-COVID, it becomes even more pertinent to see if unfortunately a certain area diagnoses a COVID instance, then we are able to track where all the waste picker has, which all households he has gone to, where all has the vehicle visited, and then which mini center which we have modularized did it get the infection into. So through all these 5 steps, I think we'll be able to um, uh, ensure that spread of any kind of a virus is contained whenever the instances occur.
Thank you so much, Chetan. It's good to see how your mobile application and overall the tool is able to bring the technology angle and help track data better, because they always say if you cannot measure it, then you cannot manage it. So I think this plays a very important role in aggregating different players in the waste management sector. At the same time, present that information. I think we have already seen. Even Mr. Malik was talking about the data control centers, wherein it's very important to measure everything so well. With that, I have one more question. Before we wrap up the session for today. And one thing, this is a very obvious question that generally should come up in a solid waste management discussion, is the multi-layered plastic, the packaging plastic being produced by the top FMCG companies. I don't need to name them, but we all know, the all of that packaging, all of those products. So when the lockdown happened and people had to stock up, or even when people were not allowed to go out for anything else, but they still had to buy the groceries. Most of these groceries actually end up coming in those multi-layered plastic for even the basic essential products you want to buy. I'm not referring to wafers, I'm not referring to PET bottles, even all the other products you end up buying, they are wrapped up in single-use plastic or multi-layered plastic, which is not recyclable as of today. While I understand that FMCG companies, some of them I know are researching and coming up with eco-friendly packaging, but in a COVID scenario, with so much packaging, being thrown away, possibly becoming infectious, and all of it is either going to the landfill or ending up into our oceans, or uh, being incinerated. What do you think? And I'll open up this question for anyone here. Dr. Sunil Pandey had to leave because he had another meeting to attend, and that's why I'm also wrapping it up in next 5 minutes. We already 15 minutes beyond schedule. What do you guys think is the role of these FMCG companies in, especially during COVID-19? Because I have seen complete silence on that front. As to coming up with efforts. The waste management companies are doing their bit, the municipal corporations are doing a lot, the NGOs are working on the ground. So where do you think the FMCG companies or the producers of this plastic need to jump in or help in some form? Very objective answer if someone wants to address this.
Shall I begin? Sunil here.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
I mean, this is a pertinent question, and especially during the lockdown, it was a challenge because actually a lot of these FMCG companies have taken up this responsibility in terms of implementing EPR mandates and targets assigned to them. And so, I mean, since the plant operations were also closed for most of the service providers, and collection and recycling also being hit. But I mean, under the EPR obligation, collection is responsibility of these companies, and they are also already, I mean, they have already initiated these activities, and I'm sure with MOFCC, with whom we are getting into a test webinar shortly, will come up soon with guidelines for plastic packaging for implementation of EPR. I mean, it has been pending for more than a year now, and that would give more direction, more targeted direction for these companies to implement the mandates of EPR. So with this, I'll thank you everyone for having me here, and also hi to Masood. And I'll have to unfortunately go, and I'll connect again later.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Pandey, for joining in, and look forward to being in touch. So on this, coming back to the same question on the plastic packaging, which is on the significant rise, and again because plastic becoming a surface which can sustain COVID-19. If anyone wants to make some comments there on the role of corporations.
I'll have a go, and then I'm keen to hear from Mr. Bansal and Chetan as well. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So currently we are probably have the largest stock of MLPs in the country. So I thought I probably have a view on this. We're collecting of the total waste that we collect, which is about maybe 6.5 million tons in a year. There are 3 waste streams that are of particular strategic importance to us. Not because they represent a great sort of recycling value or anything of that sort, but because I think the environmental footprint of those specific stream is the highest. One of them is MLP. So I can tell you that with the that this remains one of the biggest challenges for us. I cannot tell you the name of the 2 organizations, but I'm happy to tell you that there are solutions available. If you were to ever visit any of our facilities, you will be happy to see that there are products which are made out of completely recycled MLP. And I'm not talking about blending this with something else and making something else out of it. I'm talking about MLP to granules and granules to fresh product. So there are mugs and buckets and stools being made out of it today at a small scale. Why? Because we need to work with these our EPR partners, these corporations, 2 of them that we are working with, to demonstrate that this is viable at scale. Yeah. Now the scalability is the key aspect. A number of organizations, not just us, are working on this. I can tell you that it's a matter of 6 months, 1 year. A commercially viable, scalable solution for this whole issue will be in place. The focus is just too much, and when someone like Reliance starts waking up and looking at it, then you know that the solution is not far.
I'm very glad to hear that. That's a ray of hope and a message passing on to the remaining players who are producing plastic. And with EPR becoming stronger, I think we have to look at solutions that can manage plastic, the multi-layered plastic that has already been generated, and that will be generated from now till the point they move to eco-friendly or sustainable packaging. So we cannot ignore that fact that we are sitting on a huge pile of MLP, and that needs to be managed through different whatever possible ways. And I think, rightly pointed out by Dr. Pandey as well, I think EPR is going to play a very important role. Again, it took a back seat over the last couple of months, but we know that yes, FMCG companies are committing themselves to increased percentage of collection year on year. And this year the targets are supposed to become even higher than as compared to the previous year. So let's look forward to that. And I think, but policy as well as solutions and the social sector, the NGO sector, all of them will have to come together to solve this problem. Not individual one player will be able to solve this. But yes, we have seen success stories on the ground, so it is definitely possible. If attendees have questions regarding this, because there are a lot of questions still coming in, I would request them to reach out to any of the panelists, or reach out to the email addresses given to you. We will definitely try and address all the questions in the post webinar report that we'll be publishing by next week, because we want to ensure that all of your questions are addressed. And thank you so much everyone for joining in. With this, we will be wrapping up the first track for the e-summit today, which I had mentioned. We have two parts to it. The first part is solid waste management, on which we have deliberated over the last 90 minutes. And now the next track will be the wastewater management. So firstly, let me thank all the speakers and panelists who joined me in the first discussion. Honestly, it was a very enriching discussion because we could different aspects. It's not just one side of the story that we have looked at. We have looked at problems, we looked at solutions, challenges, and the way forward, the role of technology, the role of private players, everyone. So thank you, Mr. Bansal, thank you, Mr. Malik, and thank you, Chetan, for joining me today.
Thank you, Ashish.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, speakers, and Ashish, for sharing your expertise, insights, and experiences with us. We now carry on with our second track, and please join me in welcoming our expert panel. We have today with us Sadhvi Bhagwati Saraswati. She's Secretary General, Global Interfaith Wash Alliance and President, Divine Shakti Foundation. Dr. Ramnath Sonavane, Secretary, Maharashtra Water Resource Regulatory Authority. Mr. Ravindra Bhatt, Director, Base of Pyramid Solutions, Xylem Water Solutions India. Mr. Pankaj Kumar Sharma, Director, River Data Compilation, Central Water Commission. And Dr. Girish R. Popali, Senior Principal Scientist, Wastewater Technology Division from CSIR, NEERI. This session will be moderated by Mr. Ashish Sachdev, Founder President, Green Dream Foundation. Before handing over the session to Ashish, I would like to just brush up upon the basic rules as the previous sessions and the track. The speakers are requested to switch on their video and unmute themselves. Attendees, thank you for your patience and joining us for the second track. Kindly post your questions in the live chat box only. Do not unmute yourself anytime to ask questions. Ashish will definitely take over the questions once the discussion is over. I hand over the session to you, Ashish, now.
Sure. Thank you so much, Risha, for setting the tone, and welcome all the speakers and panelists for the second track for today, which is the wastewater management during COVID-19. Though some of us could already connect in advance, but I really thank for you to be joining on time and making time from your tight schedules for this important discussion with our audience today. We have more than 500 people tuned into the webinar right now, either through the live or through the social media streaming platforms. And just to give you the context, we just wrapped up, I think you might have seen, we just wrapped up the discussion on solid waste management during COVID-19. And while we have been doing a series of webinars, we realized it's very important to look at both the types and both the aspects of the waste, because both are interrelated, very strongly interrelated, which is solid waste and wastewater. The solid waste, has, while we have been discussing, we have been talking about things like reduction, managing it at source, decentralized waste management. On the water side, it's something that people have experienced during the lockdown, and that's why we wanted to bring it up in today's summit. Is these clean rivers, the water bodies. Some studies are going to be presented today. I'm really looking forward to them. Things improved, the nature improved, obviously because of reduced industrial activity. The pollution levels went down, the amount of pollution going into the wastewater, the drainage, the sewage, the chemicals, all of that obviously went down. But now the unlock, right now we're in unlock 1, and activities are going to increase. So the point is about sustaining what we built or what we automatically got as a gift in the last 2 months. And the point is, how do we, and what role does it really play even in the containment of COVID-19? We've all understood the fact that we will have to live with this virus and maybe more in the coming years due to the rapid climate change happening around us. We already have a lot of proofs for that. I don't need to get into the reasons and confirmations of climate change happening for real. However, while we're doing this, I would request all the panelists today to make the talk very, very aligned to the COVID-19 situation as well. That will be my personal request. We are here to hear your experiences and best practices. And here are a couple of points before I start, the passing on the speaking rights to all of you. We are looking forward to learn the following today. Is India prepared to treat such viruses in water with open drains and untreated sewage? We understand that in a country where a big chunk, more than 50% of the sewage goes untreated into the river bodies, how do we address this situation in a critical situation like a pandemic outbreak? Role of policy making and regulatory authorities in preventing illegal discharge of sewage and contaminated water in the river bodies. What is their role? That's very important. And sustainable and decentralized technologies and solutions for wastewater recycling through initiatives like Make in India and now Aatmanirbhar Bharat. So the point is about, we want to talk about policies, we want to talk about recommendations, best practices, data sets that you guys have, and also how decentralized and wastewater could also be the way forward. Without taking much time, because we are running I think 5 to 7 minutes late as per the schedule, I will request the first speaker for today, which is Sadhvi Bhagwati Saraswati, who is PhD Secretary General, Global Interfaith WASH Alliance. If she can hear me, I'll request her to unmute herself and also turn on the webcam.
Ashish?
Hi, Richa.
Hi, Ashish. I would request introduce and welcome Dr. Sunavane to take this ahead, as the team, Sadhvi ji's team, has been trying with their system right now.
No problem.
So,
we'll move ahead with our next panelist for today in interest of time. So I'll request Dr. Ramnath Sunavane, who's Secretary, Maharashtra Water Resource Regulatory Authority. Welcome, sir. Could you please share your thoughts?
Everyone, yeah.
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Hello.
Yes, Dr. Sunavane, we can hear you.
Yeah, yeah. You see, most of us, we are aware of one fact, that disposal of wastewater was always the last priority of urban local bodies. We do not have adequate wastewater collection systems, proper wastewater collection systems. And even if some of the urban local bodies do have the wastewater treatment plants, the plants are quite old, plants are not functioning properly, and the wastewater is discharged without proper treatment in water bodies, and it pollutes rivers, it pollutes lakes. So in the context of COVID-19, the biggest threat is, as you rightly said earlier, the biggest threat is, if at all we continue, if we continue to discharge that untreated wastewater in our water bodies, there is a likelihood of transmission of coronavirus through this untreated water. The the famous medical journal Lancet has recently published one article stating that COVID-19 coronavirus can very well survive in wastewater also, through, even though the patients are cured, after even the patients get cured, through their excreta, it can enter into a sewerage system, a grey water collection system, and through that system, if it survives, it may cause danger to other people. And that's why my biggest concern is, as we already do not have proper wastewater collection systems, urban local bodies really need to focus on actually providing proper collection and treatment systems. And the only urban local body in India which I have seen wherein wastewater is properly collected and even the sludge is properly treated. That is Vadodara. Most of the urban local bodies do have STPs. They use SBR technologies to treat wastewater. But the only municipal corporation in India that I had seen, there may be some other, I do not know, but as far as I know, there is only one urban local body which treats the sludge also by a technology developed by Baba Atomic Research Center, radiation technology. So the point I would like to make is, first of all, there are government directions, but first of all, now all state governments will have to direct urban local bodies to establish a proper sewage collection system, ensure that STPs are not there for namesake, not there for the sake of inspection. STPs are properly functioning and the norms set by the Central Pollution Control Board, the state pollution control boards are scrupulously followed by urban local bodies, and there is a system to monitor whether the urban local bodies are properly treating their wastewater or not. That is what all I have to say. I know most of the city managers, most of the municipal commissioners, they will disagree with me, because I have myself worked in urban local body and I know it was always our last priority.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sonavane, and what you are saying is definitely a strong statement, and I think the municipal corporations would have some comments on it. But thank you so much for presenting the picture that you think is the right one, because it's important to firstly acknowledge the problem before we can even try to fix it. And if there is a problem, I think in the upcoming discussion later today, we will talk about some solutions. And we'll talk about what is actually, I think my question to anyone who will be talking about policy today is that how come policies are there, but again, that's a common scenario in our country where when it comes to enforcement, whether it's wastewater or solid waste, we have seen that the enforcement becomes a challenge in spite of strong guidelines from regulatory authorities and even the apex bodies like CPCB. I think Sadhvi ji has been able to join in. I will request if she can confirm if she can hear me and then unmute herself.
Correctly. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
And I can hear you very well. Wonderful.
Great.
I've actually been able to hear you beforehand. I heard the end of the last session as well. We just were installing this and now they've got it all set. Yes, please.
Continue. So if you could just turn on the webcam as well so we can all see you while you are talking about.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought it was on. Just one moment.
Sure.
Is it on?
Yeah. Yes, we can all see you now. Welcome. Thank you so much. So, Sadhvi ji, I will request you to kindly take over and share your thoughts because you already heard me setting the tone and share the expectations of today's important discussion. We are very pleased to have you here, and we want to hear out some ground realities and how wastewater management has been impacted during COVID-19.
Sure. So first of all, it's such a wonderful, wonderful joy and honor to be together at this webinar and to really have the opportunity to turn this crisis into an opportunity. It's one thing to say, oh my God, ye ho gaya, mar gaye, ye ho raha hai, wo ho raha hai. But it's another thing to say, this is happening. How can we, in the face of this crisis, come together and really see how through the crisis we can learn so much more that we need to know about water, sanitation, and hygiene? The COVID crisis did not create the need for improved WASH. This is something, of course, that the United Nations, both in the Millennium Development Goals, then in the Sustainable Development Goals, Then, of course, in our honorable Prime Minister's Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, and all of the work that all of our individual organizations have been doing, we've been acutely aware of the essential nature of improved water, sanitation, and hygiene long before COVID. But COVID has really given us a beautiful opportunity to see why it's so necessary, and to, one of the silver linings on this very dark cloud of tragedy is for all of those of us who have been working in the fields of sanitation and hygiene for so long. Suddenly, the virus has done our work for us in a variety of ways. I do not envision us ever having to convince people of the importance of sanitation and hygiene. For years, we've been telling people कि अच्छी तरह से अपने हाथ धो लो, साबुन को इस्तेमाल करो, building hand washing stations, teaching hand washing education. And suddenly now, everybody has a bottle of sanitizer in their pocket. Suddenly now everybody knows hand washing all day long. So in that way, there's been this silver lining here. But for me, what's really important as we come together from so many different spheres is the awareness that we are all in this boat together. This isn't just about sanitation and hygiene in COVID, because even now, even with COVID rates skyrocketing, we still, all over the world, especially in India, we are still actually much more likely to get sick and even to die from the other illnesses and diseases and problems due to lack of wash than we were before COVID. What COVID has done is it has shined a very great light for us on the problems, the lack of sanitation, the lack of hygiene, the lack of improved clean water, and it has awakened people to realize the importance of coming together for it. There's a story that I love to share about this, which is the story of 3 men who are stranded in a boat in the middle of the ocean. And they start to fight, naturally, as people do in times of stress. And in order to ease their fighting, ease their stress, they divide the boat into 3 separate parts so that each man has his own 1/3 of the boat. Naturally, they weren't stranded on a boat with duct tape, so the lines are imaginary and invisible, but each man knows he has his own 1/3 of the boat. And one day, 2 of the men look over and they see that a leak has sprung in the 3rd man's part of the boat. And naturally, they panic and they say, "Stop up the leak. This boat is going to sink. We're all going to drown." And the 3rd man says, "Oh, don't worry. It's only leaking in my part of the boat." And the reason that I love this story is it's applicable for so many different areas, but we share it a lot with regard to WASH, because in fields of development, you see so much attention, so much time, so much resources working on things like alleviation of poverty, the creation of jobs, so many different areas of development, education, health. But interestingly, WASH seems to be this area where there's this leak that has sprung. And collectively, up until COVID, I think, there wasn't really a collective awareness that the leak in the part of water, sanitation, and hygiene was actually going to bring the whole boat down. And no matter what areas of development you look at, you realize that WASH actually underscores and underlies it all. We realize this on a personal level because we've been doing so much charitable and humanitarian work for so many years in fields of education, in fields of women's empowerment and upliftment, in fields of healthcare, in fields of environmental protection. And what we found was that no matter how much, for example, how many schools you build, or how beautiful your computer centers may be, or how wonderful your women's vocational training may be, if you don't build toilets and you don't teach the children or the women about the importance of using a toilet, of not defecating in the open, you don't teach them the importance of hand washing, you don't teach menstrual hygiene management, what you end up with is children who can't come to school because they're at home suffering from diarrhea, suffering from cholera, suffering from so much. You end up with girls and women who can't show up for their training because they're menstruating and they don't have the ability to take care of it in a safe and healthy and dignified way. Or because your centers themselves don't even have toilets where they are able to take care of it in a safe and hygienic way. So we realize, regardless of what area of development we're focused on, if we're not working for clean water, for improved sanitation and hygiene, we're not going to have the ability to bring that impact. We can work for healthcare all we want, but as long as the water that people are drinking is toxic and polluted, their guts are going to be ravaged by bacteria. And so it doesn't matter how many programs we bring in to feed people. As long as they've got guts ravaged by bacteria, they're going to keep having diarrhea regardless of how much you feed them, regardless of the vitamins you give them, regardless of the medicine we provide them in healthcare. And so this is why we know and why we're all together in this. We also know that across the world, more people are suffering and dying due to lack of clean water than due to all forms of violence combined. So if today, for example, there were riots and violence and people were killing each other in the name of religion or in the name of caste or in the name of culture or color or across lines of borders of countries, it's front page news. Naturally, everyone comes together to work to stop the violence. We work to end domestic violence, violence against women, drug-induced violence. But you take all of that violence, terrorism, communal violence, domestic violence, all of it, drug and alcohol-induced violence, add it all together, all forms of violence together. And the sum total still pales in comparison to the number of those who are suffering and dying due to lack of clean water. So coming back to COVID, coming back to our actual solid waste management, our actual water treatment. Look, it's not rocket science. We don't need to invent the wheel or reinvent the wheel. The technologies actually exist. Living here on the banks of Ganga, what we always say is we don't actually need to clean Ganga. Every year the monsoon comes, Ganga cleans herself. It's not about how to make that water clean. It's about how to stop contaminating. And during COVID, during lockdown, as Ganga has become so clean, as Yamuna has become so clean, what we realize is there's three main forms of toxicity, of pollution in Ganga. Number one, sewage. Number two, agricultural waste, the pesticides as well as the fertilizers. Number three, industrial waste. Now, sewage was actually still happening just as it was prior to lockdown. Nobody has stopped going to the toilet because they're on lockdown. So all of the waste that was previously entering Ganga prior to lockdown is still entering. Not that that makes it okay, it is still a massive project for us to work on, but just for a moment for us to look at this and realize sewage is still entering, agricultural runoff still entering, farmers are still growing, we're still eating. The only thing that actually has changed during the lockdown is the industrial waste from factories, which normally we think about percentage-wise is not even the greatest percentage of the waste in the rivers. But this sheer volume, the sheer billions of liters, even if percentage-wise it's not so much, volume-wise it is so much, simply shutting down the industries and the factories has actually transformed the waters of our rivers. Now, obviously, we know industry has to open, the economy has to open. But the lesson from this is very important, which is how can we take those industries? How can we take those factories? And how can we put the eco back in economy? We speak about, oh, economy to hona hai. Yeah, hona hai. But economy is rooted in the root eco. So how can we put eco back in economy? How can we make sure that the industries, the factories that are contributing to our economy, the businesses, are not ones that are earning their money through polluting our water bodies? And that is crucial and essential. And as the questions in advance asked, is this the government responsibility? On some level, between the government, between the courts, we make laws, we make rules, we make standards. But there's also a great responsibility on the part of the people. Because what we know about business is it operates based on supply and demand. As long as there is demand, there will be supply. And as long as people are clamoring for more, cheaper, as long as people are clamoring for leather handbags and leather car seats and leather shoes, there are going to be industries that figure out how to cut corners, how to produce that leather in the cheapest way. And then we end up with toxic pollution in our water bodies. And so what that means is when we really are looking at the solution, it has to be both top down and bottom up. It has to be Sarkar and Samaj, both together. Yes, the government makes the rules, enforces the rules, but we as the people have to do the work. And I know, for example, here at Parmarth Nikatan, we have our own sewage treatment plant. Yes, of course, the government has their own, but why not everybody take responsibility for themselves? Every one of us is responsible for what we buy, for what we eat, for how we dress, for how we live, for the items we purchase. We are responsible for putting our rupees back into the industries that are polluting the same water bodies that then we are spending all of the hours of our day trying to find the technology to clean. If we actually also put that time and energy into figuring out how to stop polluting it in the first place, how to make sure that we're not supporting an economic model that is directly responsible for the pollution, we will have solved a lot of the problems. And then, of course, agriculturally, well, the culture of India, the tradition of India is a tradition that's rooted in neem leaves and goba. But we've taken in the toxic chemicals of multinational companies from the West selling us poison as divide, and we've allowed it to happen. So now across the nation, farmers are using this in their lands. We are supporting it as consumers. And it's essential also for us to go back to enforcing, supporting, clamoring for organics, not just for the health of us who eat them, but for the health of our soil, for the health of our groundwater, for the health of our water bodies. Because of course, one way to solve a problem is to do damage control, to put out the fires. But the other way is to fireproof our communities. And so much of the work in WASH is all about putting out fires, and not nearly enough work is on fireproofing our communities. If we actually join hand in hand with organizations, with streams, with threads working on sustainable economies, on green economies, on sustainable businesses, there'll be a lot less for us to clean up at the end of the day. The problem is that we are all in these individual silos without realizing that the same mess we are cleaning up actually can be prevented if we join hands. And then lastly, as we look at the sewage treatment, the fecal sludge management, that aspect of sanitation, as I began, it's not rocket science. The science exists. And we even have it in India. And this really needs to become, when we speak about Make in India. Make in India is not just about entrepreneurship. It's not just about startups of technology. Starting up is great, but we have to ask ourselves, where are we going? Mahatma Gandhi said so beautifully, what's the point of that fast speed that has no direction? And so much of our focus in Make in India, in startups, in entrepreneurship, is this great, wonderful energy to create, to invent, to develop, to succeed. But we have to also ask ourselves, starting up is great, lekin kahan ja rahe hum? And to use that energy and that ability that we have in this nation, in our youth, in our science, in our technology, for solutions. Solutions for the sewage, solutions for the waste, but solutions also in the economy to prevent that waste from entering our waterways to begin with. And subse last, just to mention with regard to the sanitation and hygiene these days in COVID, even the scientists are telling us, the immunologists are telling us, that better than hand sanitizer is basic soap. And so these days there's so much going on about sanitizer, and people creating it. And it's great, we should have it in places where we don't have soap. But we shouldn't lose sight of the decades and decades of research on the importance of proper hand washing in favor of sanitizer. Really, we need to re-emphasize that importance of proper hand washing, setting up hand washing stations, bringing that education into all sectors, because together we will emerge from this. It is an emergency, but it gives us the opportunity to emerge and to see what together, joining hands, make in India, make India, for India and for the world. And we can do it, working together. So thank you so much for this beautiful opportunity to join you on this webinar, on this essential topic of COVID, but beyond COVID. Because even after we cure COVID or have a vaccine, we're still going to have diarrhea, we're still going to have cholera, we're still going to have all of what we had before. So my sisters and brothers, we must not become complacent. We must take these lessons and use them to continue to fight against all of the waterborne illnesses and ailments, all of the viruses and bacteria that come from lack of sanitation and hygiene. And together we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadhviji. Thank you so much for joining in and sharing your thoughts Whatever you just explained over the last few minutes made complete sense, obviously. But more than that, it is a good reminder for a lot of people who are hearing this. Personally, I had two takeaways, which I'll quickly share, and then we'll discuss because there are a lot of other people waiting also. But first is I realized that a lot of times the solution to our problems lies in the practices of our past. I think the past was very sustainable, the way we used to live and we used to manage, and the revelation of the industrial activities stopping and rivers becoming so clean sends a lot of clear signals, and is a reminder for a lot of people in regulatory authorities and positions in enforcement bodies to do their work rightly. All of us can do our bit, all of us must do our bit, but we will get there when everyone does their bit, even if not complete, even if we do something about it. If environmental clearances become easier in our country, and if the enforcement of laws and policies is not there, uh, we will keep talking about initiatives like Namami Gange, National Mission for Clean Ganga. Those initiatives had been running for decades, and then 2 months the lockdown teaches us, the coronavirus teaches us that this is what you need to do to clean this up. Right? You do not need millions and millions of dollars to clean the river. You need just a few efforts, but done rightly to achieve it. And again, it's all about capturing pollution at source, whether it is water pollution, whether it is air pollution. The right strategy is always capturing it at source instead of letting it pollute the water and then trying to fix, because that's always counterproductive. We have to capture pollutions and manage them at source. These are just a couple of the takeaways that I had. But it was a pleasure hearing you, for me, for all the panelists and all the attendees. If you could still be here with us for a few more minutes while other people present, we'll be very obliged. But if you need to leave in between, please let us know. But thank you so much. We'll proceed with the next set of discussions now. So now we have, after a great discussion, now we also have talking on the solutions side of things, and sustainable technologies, Mr. Ravindra Bhatt, who is the director base of Pyramid Solutions, Xylem Water Solutions India. Without taking much time, I'll request him to kindly take over. And Ravindra ji, I'll pass on the presenter rights to you, because I think you have a few slides to share in parallel, and you should have received the rights by now. Over to you. Great, we can see your screen. And we should also be able to hear you now.
Yeah, I can hear now.
Yes, all good.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you, Ashish, for organizing this seminar. I don't know. Echo. Is it?
Your voice is breaking a bit.
Yeah, should I don't know. I have.
Yeah, now this is fine.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm still able to hear the echo. I don't know whether you're all able to hear it, and I'll continue. You can fix the audio if it is not working properly. Once again, thank you, Ashish and Exhibition India, for organizing this event. I straight away go to the subject. Much has been talked about COVID and its impact on our life and how it can cripple our economy. But we should know that it's just a tip of an iceberg. Antimicrobial resistance or antibiotic resistant bacteria would pose a bigger threat to our lives in future. Experts also suggest that there may be emergence of new viruses that can create havoc in our life. Mr. Sonawane said, there's a possibility of virus that studies have suggested actually. So we need to be, we all have responsibility now to convert this crisis into an opportunity to build resilient and sustainable infrastructure for future, so that we don't get into this kind of situation in case of emergence of new viruses, or in case of the spread of ARBs. Let's understand the water cycle. To put in simple terms, we take water from the sources such as lakes, rivers. We treat it, use it, and then the used water we discharge. To manage this water cycle safely, government actually regulates the drinking water standard to protect the public health at large, and also government regulates the wastewater discharge standards to protect the biodiversity. Let's come to the Indian situation. Where are we? As Mr. Sonal said, the virus can travel to the water bodies if it is not contained. Just take the case of hospitals where the COVID patients are there and the quarantine centers. The wastewater from such facilities would be discharged, and it ultimately comes to the municipal treatment facility, where it is supposed to treat the wastewater, remove all the microbial contamination apart from other contamination, and then the treated water is discharged to the water body. In India, roughly we produce about 80,000 million liters of wastewater in the urban cities. Puts and take, we have about 15-20%. This number can be debated, can be, I don't know, somewhere you may get 50%, I don't know, but the key thing here is that we don't have sufficient capacity to treat the wastewater generated. Even the STPs, as Mr. Sonal said, which are being built are defunct. They don't operate at their design levels, most of the STPs. So what happens is typically large volume of sewage is discharged untreated to the water bodies. So this actually poses a potential COVID transmission medium. What can we do? The response to this challenge has to be both short-term, long-term, and both government actions as well as people participation. On a government level, whether it's a policy making or it's execution, the first thing what we can do is, which is a low-hanging fruit, we can operationalize at least the existing wastewater treatment plants to its design levels. In the policy level, the technology selection has to be looking at the future threats. It has to be robust and flexible, and mostly should be a combination of technologies such as UV, ozone, ultrafiltration, some of the technologies that I'm naming few here. Most importantly, again, Mr. Sonal touched upon this, is the sludge treatment. We don't have sludge treatment, though policies have been framed in some states, even at the center, but the implementation has been extremely poor. We don't have good technology except for what mentioned about the radiation for the radiation technology developed by the BRC. In terms of our responsibility, I would say, apart from the hygiene habits advised, hand washing, social distancing, masks, etc., what we can do is to avoid the risk of recontamination in the drinking water. We can actually install a complete home water treatment as against the home purifiers that we have in most of our homes. Actually, water treatment at home is an effective barrier in case of virus transmission through water or wastewater. Even if it reaches, home water treatment will be an effective barrier, which we can avoid risk. Coming to the solutions, for wastewater treatment, we have been providing IKSSBR as a secondary treatment solution for the municipal corporations for more than 50 years. We're also making UV disinfection systems for the wastewater. In India, we are making this UV in Bangalore facility. In Baroda, where Sonal mentioned, Baroda, we have installed UV for the wastewater treatment plant. We are also launching a one-stage reuse quality treatment technology, It's called MMBR. We'll be launching soon. Most importantly, we are also launching a sludge treatment technology. This is based on thermal oxidation. Ashish, actually, I heard in the previous discussion, you spoke about the pollution in the incineration. The thermal oxidation would address those issues of all the or air pollution because of the incineration. Thermal oxidation actually goes above incineration. It's done at about 1000 degrees actually. So we have a pilot running in Baroda. It's not just sufficient to have wastewater treatment. As I said, water keeps moving in cycle. So we need to really focus on even water treatment also. For municipal, again, the conventional treatment plants or the existing treatment plants do not have sufficient, I would say, technologies, or the technologies employed by the municipal corporations may not be able to address the current crisis. The municipal corporation can, now upgrade the existing plants with the UV, with ozone, or even change the way the water is filtered. We also have distributed or packaged drinking water solutions for the rural communities under Jal Jeevan Mission. Now this government wants to actually provide tap treated drinking water to every household. So we have products, we have launched the products to address this requirement. And also for schools, we have built about 120 units already we have installed in schools. That's where we have to really build the resilience. And as I said, for the homes, we have a home purifier which can treat water for the entire house instead of as against just a kitchen purifier. You all know that if you have to teach society or educate the society, the best way to educate them is to educate children. We have a complete wash solution. That's water, sanitation, and hygiene solution for the schools, which includes drinking water treatment units, surface disinfection for the classroom, and bathroom disinfection, and hand washing stations, and hygiene education material for the children. Thank you. Any question I can take now, or I can take discussion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ravindra, for sharing. And it's a pleasure to hear that so many installations across the country and new solutions that are also in the pipeline. One question that I would love to ask is, you must be going to a lot of ULBs, for proposing these projects, proposing these technologies. What is the top challenge that you face at your level? Is it also the fact that the only criteria for selecting a solution is the cost of it, or is environmental friendly process also considered to be an important factor while deciding the solution to be implemented by a ULB in our country?
No, I would say there are two major challenges. One is, as Mr. Sonavan, he set the context. He said the wastewater treatment is the last priority, even though it's an obligation of a municipal corporation to treat the wastewater and discharge. So it becomes a last priority because for them, supplying drinking water, roads, all those things, the common infrastructure takes a higher priority. And most of the municipal corporations, as you know, they don't have a good revenue. That's where, with the limited resources, they will have to build the infrastructure. So the wastewater takes the beating all the time. The second one is the implementation, as you pointed out, the implementation of the regulation, whether it is CPCB norms, whether it is NGT norms. The implementation of the regulation is not up to what we would have expected. These are the two challenges. The second one actually leads to everyone writing their own tender specs, everyone to suit their budget. So we end up compromising.
Understood. Understood. Thank you for addressing that point. There are more questions coming up, but in interest of the time, we'll firstly move on to the remaining speakers for today. And in the last Q&A round, we'll take a lot of questions that are coming in from the attendees live. So you could stop sharing your screen now. And now I'll request, and thanks for being so patient, Mr. Pankaj Kumar Sharma, who's the Director, River Data Compilation at Central Water Commission. I would now request him to kindly share his thoughts also from the perspective of role of policy making, regulatory authorities, and more. Looking forward to hear from him. Also, over to you, Mr. Pankaj.
Good afternoon, our dignified co-panelists, for their wonderful thoughts. From regulatory authorities' roles of bodies in water quality monitoring, control, pollution control, I would initially say that I also have a small presentation ready with me with respect to work of my organization, which we can share with you all, and I can finish it in within 5 minutes. Can you?
Yes, we can see
my
you.
screen? Okay. So in India, we have organizations related with monitoring of environmental pollution in 3 layers at central level. The most important ministry we all know is Ministry of Environment and Forests, MOEF. They have acts related to prevention of pollution in water, air, groundwater, and overall environmental protection EPA Act is also there, which is mainly monitored by their Central Pollution Control Board, CPCB. And CPCB does it with help of state pollution control boards and local level bodies like municipalities and all those things. They are monitoring the environmental pollution in our country. In the long list of organizations involved in monitoring of water quality, I would like to showcase the work being done by Central Water Commission, attached Office of Ministry of Jal Shakti, Department of Water Resources, River Development and Ganga Rejuvenation. We have in the ministry, there are 2 more very important bodies which we have in last few years, NMCG, National Mission for Clean Ganga, and NRCD, National River Conservation Directorate. They are now part of Ministry of Jal Shakti, and they are overall looking after rejuvenation of rivers and prevention of pollution in the rivers. While going through these slides, we shall also discuss what they are doing. Mainly, this slide is, we have 17 slides here. The 15 slides I will speedily cover up. They are mostly images and maps. And last 2 slides are related to the work which we have taken during lockdown period. That would be interesting. So in CWC, we are doing hydrological observations since 1950s, and since 1960s, along with the quantity, we are also measuring quality of the water. What kind of quality is there? And you can see that from 319 sites, as on date, we are having 634 water quality sites along with our hydrological observation network. Apart from these 634 sites, we have exclusive water quality sampling stations also in some of their places, 33 in numbers. This is the basin wise, state wise and organization wise. CWC has 13 field organizations looking after the basins. These are modeled on river basins. BNBBO means Brahmaputra and Barak Basin Organization. LGBO means Lower Ganga Basin Organization, kind of thing. We have a 3-tier laboratory system. In labs, we are having our own scientists and our own people collect samples from rivers. I would take 1 minute in explaining how do we collect samples so that our role is very clear to all the participants. We collect samples from designated points across the rivers. We divide rivers in 4 parts and we collect samples at depths, designated depths. We mix all those samples of water and then we test it. So we are testing the background water quality level of river at a particular place. Those samples are analyzed in 3-tier laboratory system at sites, our hydrological observation sites. At site itself, we measure water samples for 6 parameters at 295 locations. We have 18 level 2 labs where we measure 25 physicochemical and bacteriological parameters. We have 5 advanced labs where, along with the above parameters, we are also measuring pollution due to trace and toxic metals, and we are improving our infrastructure of these 5 labs so that we can measure pesticides also. 12 of our labs are NABL accredited and remaining we are trying to cover up within next year. This is a simple sample map showing where are our level 1 and level 2 labs. These are the details of the parameters which we are doing, and pesticides we are still trying to do. Now, the good thing is that Ministry has a policy related to the data which Central Water Commission collects from its sites spread across the country. These parameters are some of the hydrological parameters are classified. We cannot share it with in general public. And it can be given only through a set procedure as per this policy. But water quality data is entirely unclassified. Anyone can view it. It is available through our Central Water Commission website. It is also available through our India Water Resources Information System WRIS website. And all of our data we are providing to CPCB. CPCB, Central Pollution Control Board, has full access to data of CWC. They are one of the major users. We are planning to expand our network of 634 sites by taking up 464 more locations. And these are the locations which we are trying to expand our network. Still, it's work in process. Now, just to give you an idea what kind of work we have done, I have sampled some of our publications. All these reports are available on our CWC, Central Water Commission website. Water Quality Hotspot Study. It was done during 2014-2017. Trace and toxic metal study. This study we are doing since long, and these are the last 4 reports: 2012, 2014, 18, and 19. All the reports are available on our website. And this was a recent study which we have concluded only last year: effect of time and temperature on dissolved oxygen level of river waters. Sometimes on directions of higher authorities, we also take a study to find out the reason of a status of water quality after incidents. This is one of these incidents which happened last year in the state of Punjab. We are also trying to develop a water quality index, so that like air in quality index, so that general people can understand that how much polluted is water. This is also a work in progress. And now the matter of interest, I would like to take some time, because although I have summarized this work in only 2 slides, but you can understand that how difficult it would have been for our field officers to arrange vehicles, to arrange permissions, to go to actual river sites and collect samples, and then sending back those samples to labs for testing. It was difficult, and now we can collect samples from 128 locations during lockdown period. We can also collect gauge and discharge information on 57 stations. On gauge and discharge, I would not focus much, because the river discharge, the flow in river is dependent on monsoon only. It has no effect due to lockdown or whatsoever we can say. In some rivers like Yamuna, we observed more flow, because there was very less extraction for industrial purpose, and there was good monsoon also. So in respect of similar periods before lockdown, river Yamuna had better discharge this year. What we found, that out of 97 stations, dissolved oxygen values improved at 76 locations, and total dissolved solids, which is measured by measuring electrical conductivity, improved at 70 locations. Similarly, water quality considerably improved at 29 locations out of 31 which we measured in terms of biochemical oxygen demand, BOD. The total coliform is an indicator how much bacteriological pollution is in river. It also shown considerable decrease at 27 stations out of 28. The water was clearer at 7 locations out of 10 which we can measure. The chemical oxygen demand also improved at 23 locations out of 37 locations. So what we can say, TDS was also measured, and it was found that out of 9 locations, it was quite improved in comparison to other places. The improvement values were in range of 30 to 40%. The values, actual values, in comparison with past long-term average of similar period. I cannot show you the entire data and all the complete study in the limited time frame, but it was concluded by us that yes, we can say with help of facts and figures that yes, water quality of rivers has improved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. I think it's proven with the facts and the numbers that you have presented that obviously there was significant improvement in the quality of water in our water bodies, and monitoring is very important to back up our claims and what we see officially. However, I think increasingly what people are also asking on the live chat, it's very important on how can we sustain this, or how can we prevent the pollution going into the river bodies beyond the lockdown, and now the unlock one has already begun. How do we start? Have we learned something from that as a group of citizens, as organizations, as corporations who are wanting to be responsible? I think we have a long way to go. It begins with awareness, which that's the intention of organizing this webinar, but also another intention is to convert this into action. We have heard time and again that there is lack of action on the side of ULBs, and I have a question. If anyone of the panelists they're open to answer this, So for the ULBs, when the citizens, let's talk from the perspective of citizens, they go around cities, they see drains, they see river bodies being polluted, all kind of pollution in there, not just industrial, not just chemicals, but all kind of plastic waste, all kind of trash. Indirectly or directly, not managing your solid waste correctly also ends up into the water. And we have enough stories to understand and how this entire waste flows down eventually from rivers to the oceans of the world. If a ULB is not doing something about it, what are the regulations or policies that the citizens or NGOs should refer to push them to implement solutions and not take the health and environment for granted? Anyone can take up that question.
Some of the inputs, although it would have been better if we had a representation from NMCG, NRCD and CPCB also, they would have answered this question in more authentic and authoritative manner. But the NMCG story, they are working quite hard. I had been part of some of interactions with them, and the last very important work in context of city of Varanasi, they were able to tap means they were able to divert the flow to sewage treatment plant of one of the most polluting nala there. The sewage treatment, the untreated sewage, definitely we all know that rivers have self-purification capability. After traveling for some distance with turbulence and with air and oxygen interchange, river cleanses itself. And but with increase of population, we cannot leave our rivers for this natural treatment process, and 100% tapping of sewage treatment plants like NMCG by providing the financial help, by providing technical help, by guiding the local authorities and urban local bodies into reviving their sewage treatment plants, they are on right path. And this is the least which we supposed that for being really labeled as a developed country, at least all the urban pollution, all the urban centers, 100% of effluent should be treated, should be released in the rivers only after treated. After treatment, the fact we should remember that even after treatment, we are not releasing the water which is as per standards of CPCB drinking water or river classification. The last I can recall that 20 ppm is the parameter for release from a treatment plant. So still it will require some volume of clean water so that river may appear cleaner like they are appearing right now in lockdown period. And obviously this is not a forum, but proper use of water, conservation of water. I am hearing this being part of Central Water Commission. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all the citizens that we know that we are almost the second most populous country, and the kind of water resources we are having is dwindling day by day. And right now, we are very soon, we shall have only 1150 meter cube per capita water availability. And the water conservation use of water with its conservation in mind can really help. Thank you.
Definitely. And I think there's one more question specifically that has come in for you, Mr. Sharma, which is what could be the major reason, the quality being observed during COVID days, though all the industries generally have their own treatment system and government bodies are monitoring. Still, why, we are seeing the river bodies are becoming better during COVID-19?
During COVID-19, we all know the Sadhvi Bhagwati Saraswati also highlighted this, that the major issue was that during COVID-19, these factories were 100% shut down, closed. There was no discharge from these factories or industrial activity. We cannot say so for human activity and agricultural activity. These were never stopped 100%. So during COVID-19 started from March. These are lean season. During these season, and we can say that our rivers are almost at their lowest levels. What helped that, just as I told you before, that the approved discharge from industrial effluents, that is 20 ppm, and if a river is having more than 5 or 6 ppm of TDS or solids, it starts appearing like dirty. Its appearance changes. So if we are allowing 20 ppm of discharge from industrial effluents, we need more waters in rivers, which is due to population increase, use of water for agricultural purpose, that we cannot stop. We have to, we know that all the life, all the activity is dependent on water. All that water is being made available from rainfall which finally comes down and flows in our rivers and goes down to groundwater, which we again pump and reuse, and while using it we pollute it. The level of pollution permitted is such that at present it is 20 ppm. If that kind of industrial effluent, after assuming that it is treated 100% within industrial compounds, it is released after proper treatment within factories, even then it will have 20 ppm, which will require a lot of 0 ppm or 5 ppm water to make it appear, make our rivers appear cleaner. That is not possible. We don't have that water. We don't have that much of reservoirs in country. We don't have a storage in our country that can provide water in river during lean season.
Noted. I think that should definitely address the question from the gentleman. And because we have very limited time left and one more speaker to go, and we have to keep 5 minutes for the question and answers also, because we have a lot of more questions coming in live from everyone. So thank you, Mr. Sharma. I will now request Dr. Girish to kindly take over. Mr. Girish is a senior principal scientist, wastewater technology division at CSIR, National Environmental Engineering Research Institute. I'll request you to please take over, Dr. Girish, and share your thoughts over the next 6 to 7 minutes on regarding what we have heard so far, and how can we sustain or how can we improve the quality of water, as well as what new can be done or should be done to manage our wastewater better during the COVID-19 and beyond. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Ashish. It was a really pleasure to hear all And having said this, my job has been made pretty easy because most of the speakers have spoken about the policy issues, and Sadhviji spoke very well. And I must appreciate her concern and points that she raised. I'll be basically speaking about quickly on two aspects. The first one is the role of policymakers and regulatory authorities on wastewater management all across the country. You see that we have sanitation coverage in India through sewage system to the tune of maximum 40%. And as a matter of fact, that most of the cities or small towns, they are not sewered, so we do not have sewage system done for collection of sewage. So under the Swachh Bharat mission, most of the country, like except Jammu and Kashmir and some north Indian states, northeast Indian states, we are now headed. We have rather headed for a ODF free country. So, and under this particular mission, we have provided nearly 7 millions of toilets, that is 70 lakhs toilets. So, in addition to the unsewered waste that is generated from our towns, we are also going to generate a lot of fecal sludge and septage. So, this is going to be a big challenge in coming days to us. So sanitation coverage for the rest of the country, that is 50% is through sewage, and rest 50% is is going through open drains. So we need to have the guidelines and policies for fecal sludge management, because fecal sludge, as of now in India, there are no guidelines. I mean, we have some state where the fecal sludge management manuals are being issued, but we do not have clear-cut roles and responsibilities of each ULB or the stakeholder, that how fecal sludge should be collected, how fecal sludge should be transported. And given that in this present time of Corona, it is likely that we are going to generate fecal sludge or sewage through open drainage system, which may affect, or it will have a greater impact of fecal sludge and open drainage system, and it will affect our the health. So it's very important that we start looking at the revisiting the guidelines and formulation. I would like to touch upon here the policies and standards which are being framed. You might be aware that very recently NGT had ordered revised guidelines for discharge standards of sewage. Incidentally, we were involved in giving suggestions to the Honorable NGT. Previously, there were guidelines for discharge of sewage on, either on sewage system or discharge on water bodies or discharge on land or irrigation. But those standards were all, were removed, and now CPCB had given those discharge standards for based on the population, which was not actually very appropriate, because a small town also requires the same sanitation which a big town requires. So we had suggested change in the guidelines, and we had even suggested that our guidelines should be based on the type of the receiving environment rather than the type of population, because a small town having population of say 5,000 would also require the same kind of sanitation facilities. You cannot have different standards for a small town, and for mega metropolitan cities you have different standards. So it is very important that we have sector specific or the receiving type of environment guidelines. For example, there were no guidelines related to nutrients. If you discharge your treated sewage to a pond or lake, it's going to affect the entire ecology of the lake. So we really need sector-specific guideline, and we hope that we have suggested this to CPCB, and we have written some documents on that. If time had permitted, I would have really made presentation on that. But anyway, so now coming back to the effect of corona on water bodies. It is likely that that corona will be definitely found in wastewater. But as far as India is concerned, we have to work on few areas, like we have to identify what is the fate of corona in sewage. That's very important. Identification of corona in wastewater through open drain system. Then are our existing disinfection facilities enough that we can remove or eradicate this corona? So there are going to be big challenges in front of us, and we have to start working on, especially in terms of tackling the coronavirus for sewage management. This is going to be very, very important. And as a matter of fact, that urban local bodies where sewerage system is not existing and they have lots of open drainage, as a matter of safety, they should try to disinfect such open drainage system, so that any possibility of contamination through surfaces, is avoided. Because if as far as India is concerned, to my knowledge, we have not heard anything that where COVID has been detected in sewage, but it is going to affect us. So we need to have a long-term strategy and have a short-term immediate strategy, so that right now we are only identifying COVID in humans, but we have not really seen whether COVID is being also detected in our water bodies or in open drainage systems. So this is very important to make ourselves ready for what is the fate and how best we can deal with the COVID effect as far as sewage is concerned. The second topic that I would like to touch upon is the sustainable and decentralized sanitation. It's very important. Like Sadhviji was mentioning, that they do have a sewage treatment facility. It's really important. It's really pleasure to listen, and I would like to see once whenever I'm there. But there are two things. It can be defined in two ways. One is decentralized sanitation, and the other one is on-site sanitation. There is a little bit difference in that. Like provision of toilet is an on-site sanitation facility, which in itself is not a complete treatment, but it gives sanitation. Whereas decentralized is like collecting it and then treating it. So it's going to be huge importance in this particular sustainable decentralized sanitation. So while we look for decentralized sanitation, it's important to consider three aspects. The first one is the economics. The second one is the technical aspects. Economics would include how much area or land you have available, how much money you have to run the systems, and of course in how much cost it would require. Like urban local bodies, small urban local bodies, they do not have sufficient funds, so they may have to resort to a treatment which is not very costly, which is mostly nature based. And the ease of operation, then the third one I would call it as the most important is administrative. So while we look for a decentralized solution, three factors like the economic, then the administrative and technical. In technical criteria, we need to consider whether we are going to treat the sewage and making it reusable for any non-potable use. Like we can reuse it for toilet flushing, we can reuse for gardening. So in technical criteria, we need to decide the designated end use of the treatment system. So these are all the things. So and in decentralized, there are two important aspects. Again, we can consider whether the system should be compact or whether the system should be nature-based. For example, a small community which does not have lots of funds and do not have skilled manpower, they can resort to nature-based solutions. And to tell you honestly, everything, the knowledge base and information is all available with us. It's only how the deployment and how can we make it sustainable. So public participation is very important while we implement the decentralized facilities. So with this, I mean, it's my pleasure to speak on this very relevant topic. I would have really loved to make a presentation, but due to the time constraints, I would like to wrap up here and give a big thank to the organizers for giving me this opportunity to speak on the wastewater track. Thank you very much, and I will be happy to answer the questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Girish, for that informative talk. It's a pleasure to have you here. And, I really resonate to the fact about sensitization of the citizens. And I think not just at the grassroots level, but I think from bottom of the pyramid to the top of the systems, everyone needs to be sensitized on the importance. While all of them might be sensitized already in some sense, but I think the lack of urgency keeps going away because we have competing priorities in our country. We have essential services to offer, we have pandemics to manage, we have natural calamities to take care of as well. However, none of that could be or should be ignored. And the answer is you could have 10 problems with 10 different answers, or you could practice sustainability and all of that would get addressed. So I think that's something that everyone needs to acknowledge. Whatever we implement, whatever we do, the sustainability is not just a term for a corporate to adapt. Sustainability is a way of living. Even the day-to-day lifestyle that we follow, if we try to make that sustainable itself, I think the bigger problem already starts getting solved. So I think that acknowledgement is very important. And without taking much time, because it's already 5 p.m. and I really thank all the attendees as well who have been so patient with us, but the talk has actually been very, very informative is the feedback I've been receiving. And I'll take up a couple of questions which I feel must be taken, and the remaining will be addressed by emailing the attendees. The first question I feel would be best addressed by Sadhvi Bhagwati. And the question is, the major hurdle we face is the social acceptability of wastewater reuse. How can this be addressed?
So this is a great question. And circling back to the treatment plant that we have actually here at the ashram, it treats the sewage and then actually we reuse the gray water here in the ashram already. Our gardens and everything are being run by that cleaned wastewater, the gray water. And it's being used in so many other ways and places here as well. And I think, like so many things, it's just a matter of slowly getting people used to it. I know when we first started working for ending open defecation and getting people to use toilets, at the beginning, people literally said, nahi, wo to bahut gandi baat hai. Bahar khula mein, that is clean, that is pure. But under band, kaise wo to gandi baat hai. And we had to explain to people that actually no, actually the toilet is the way that keeps you clean, but also keeps our land clean, keeps our communities clean, keeps the water clean. But it takes a while, because if you realize that these cultural ideas have existed for hundreds and hundreds of years, I mean, it's not that open defecation started last year. It's been hundreds of years when people were very less, land was a lot, water was a lot. And so, sure, to go in the field, it was a form of natural fertilizer and no problem. It only became a problem as the populations grew, as people became more, land became less, water became less. And so in the same way, a lot of cultural things have to keep changing. And when you speak about the use of that water, this is absolutely one of them. Composting is another one. There's some great waste solutions that end up giving you compost. And again, though, the idea for people of using that in not just a field that is outside, but actually your own gate for your own agriculture. That's also something that people are not yet ready to really take. But I think that the more of us who come together, and this is really one of the aspects that we're seeing in our Global Interfaith WASH Alliance, is the power of faith to really change how people think. We've seen it with open defecation, we've seen it with menstrual hygiene. Same thing, people thought, can't be talking about this, this is dirty, this is impure. But as you bring the world of faith into it, it really changes how people think. And I think that if as a collective culture, we talk about it, we use it, we publish things about it, we share about it on Facebook, that slowly, slowly things will absolutely change. The power of social media these days has given a great boost to the power of changing how people think. You've got the ability to reach people so much faster and in so much more mass quantity these days than we ever did before. We don't have to wait for, word of mouth, slowly, slowly, slowly. WhatsApp is there immediately. So it's a great question, it's a great topic, and we really need to come together as much as we can and make that part of the new normal.
Definitely, completely agree with you, Sadhvi Bhagwati, because what you said is also a very important point. The social media, I think that is a very important tool, can be utilized in the right way to pass on sustainable messaging, sustainable practices. We see a lot of people trying to do zero waste living, zero discharge living, trying to make their house completely self-sufficient. I think those stories are becoming increasingly frequent and more popular, which inspires a lot of people. And while, because population obviously is the root cause, or you can say the key reason why we have to manage waste, whether it's solid or wastewater. Otherwise, nature had all the ways to manage all of the waste on its own. Like, for example, the problem of plastic pollution only started when we started manufacturing plastics of low quality which were not recyclable, like the multi-layered plastic. However, when MLPs were not there, most of the waste, even in the rural India, most of the waste being generated is organic waste, which is easily composted. But in cities, that problem takes a different angle altogether, and same logic applies to the wastewater as well. In fact, a couple of I see someone, Girish, I think Dr. Girish, you're sharing the screen. Do you want to present or share something?
Yeah, just like to mention this this particular slide, which speak about demonstration of a natural treatment system for sewage. There you can see that it's like we have sewage collection from a small community, which is implemented in Ordnance Factory in Nagpur, and we treat this water, and after treatment it goes through wetland system. We have anaerobic system, then followed by constructed wetland, and then thereafter some cascade aeration. And then look at the quality. That this is what I want to show you. This is the sewage which has been treated, and after this it is discharged for green belt development. So there was a complete water scarce area, and we developed a very good green belt over there. So around 1 lakh litre per day of sewage is treated using this natural treatment system. So, I mean, once we treat it, there will not be any inhibitions. And once people see that, seeing is believing, when they start practicing and start reusing for all such purposes. So there is a whole set of change in the mindset, and people start reusing it. And we save a lot of fresh water, because it's really, actually, it's crime to use fresh water for toilet flushing. So I mean, there are many ways that water can be recycled, like firefighting or green belt development, or just for recharging of the groundwater. So this part of I mean, sector in India has to be, we have to look for, and we have to think of recycling the treated sewage. This is just what I wanted to show. That's all.
Definitely, and I think that's a great example of what can be achieved with the change in mindset and trying to achieve something at a community level. First time is always the most difficult, but we know humanity resists change, whether it's a good change or a bad change. We resist change. We were resisting going into lockdown. Now we are also resisting coming out of lockdown, right? So
Yeah,
we have this.
very good saying by Sri Swami Vivekananda, who said that for any change or for new thing, people first resist. They don't accept it. Later they stop resisting, and then finally they accept it. So
Exactly.
like we have accepted, we never accepted the face mask and all those things. So now it has become reality, and we ask people to use it. So this also has to come in practice. Yes.
Definitely, completely agree. So I think while we had an amazing interactive discussion with all of you today, all of you who made the presentations, if you're comfortable, you can email it to Richa from Exhibitions India Group. We will be floating it with all the attendees so that they can refer to this. The recording of this entire webinar, because we anyway streamed this live on Facebook, is available there. And otherwise also this webinar was recorded through GoToWebinar. We'll be sharing that link as well. The purpose is to not end this 3-hour discussion that we had today here. The purpose is that all of us, not just the panelists, but the speakers, the attendees, the organizers, everyone remains connected, and we try to do something meaningful out of it, because I love to emphasize this all the time. And whenever my organization Green Dream Foundation collaborates with Smart Cities India Expo, we do it with the point of not just doing another conference or a webinar. And that's why we started doing this series a little late as well. We want to make sure we are having meaningful conversations, and we drive these to some results as well. So at any point of time you feel some kind of partnerships can be explored, we need to talk about a certain topic more often at a certain forum, we are very open to your feedback. Please feel free to write us an email after this webinar as well. And we would love to stay in touch with all of you, because all of you, the knowledge and the experience that you carry, the spiritual knowledge, the spiritual connections, the ground knowledge, the domain experience, everything came together today. And I'm really, really thankful to all of you for joining in, and to all the attendees.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a pleasant day ahead.
Thanks so much, Ashish ji. It was beautiful, beautiful moderation.
Thank you so much, Sadhi Bhagwati. It was a pleasure to have you.
For the great work your organization is doing, and everybody's organizations.
Thank you so much. Have a good day. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.